There are places in China so breathtaking, so mysterious, they feel like they belong to another world. Realms where towering peaks vanish into clouds, ancient temples cling to cliffs, and nature expresses itself with wild, unrestrained beauty. In this journey, we explore some of the planet's most unreal locations, hidden mountains, sacred landscapes, and untouched wonders that defy imagination and invite awe. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. High in the mountains of central China, veiled often in a sea of drifting clouds and mist, stands the legendary Laojun Mountain in Henan Province, a place of myth, reverence, and surreal natural grandeur. It is not merely a peak, but a living testament to the harmony between spirituality and nature, where millennia of Daoist philosophy seem to pulse in the very granite underfoot. Known as the Retreat of Laozi, the sage author of the Tao Te Ching, Laojun Mountain is more than just a mountain. It is a sanctified stage where the celestial and earthly realms appear to meet. Rising nearly 2,200 meters above sea level, the mountain's defining icon is its golden summit temple, gleaming like a flame against the ever-shifting cloudscape. Perched dramatically on the knife edge of the mountaintop, this Daoist temple glows in the early morning sun, its polished gold leaf panels reflecting the sky in dazzling hues of amber and vermilion. Visitors often hike through winding forest paths and steep stairways to reach this heavenly pinnacle, sometimes cutting through dense fog that seems to veil the mortal world below. When the mists lift, the scene opens like a vision, clouds rolling beneath your feet, jagged ridges silhouetted against a distant horizon, and the temple shining with unearthly luminance, a sight that many describe as walking into a divine painting. Laojun Mountain's spiritual legacy runs deep. Daoist monks have meditated here for centuries, drawn to its serenity and natural isolation. Shrines and stone inscriptions along the hiking trails speak to ages past, some so old that moss has nearly erased the characters. Incense smoke curls from ancient pavilions, coiling upward into the silence of the forest canopy, as if carrying whispered prayers toward the heavens. Pilgrims still come each year, especially during festivals like the birthday of Laozi, to pay homage, chant scriptures, and make offerings amid the crisp mountain air. What makes Laojun Mountain especially surreal, though, is not just its religious history or natural splendor, but the cloud seas that often envelop its peaks. These clouds form thick blankets below the summit, creating the visual illusion that the temple and its surrounding cliffs float above the sky. During sunrise, light pierces the cloud banks with golden shafts, casting long shadows and rainbow halos known as Buddha's light. It is a phenomenon so ethereal that visitors frequently describe it as out-of-body or dreamlike. Photos hardly do justice. This is a place one must breathe in, heart pounding, limbs aching from the climb, to truly understand its transcendence. Beyond the summit, the mountain range sprawls in forested majesty, part of the broader Funyo Mountains. Here, the biodiversity is rich and preserved. Native pine and oak trees frame winding ridges, birdsong echoes through the canyons, and wildflowers bloom in spring with explosions of color across the meadows. The lower slopes host monasteries and guest lodges, some offering traditional tea ceremonies and Daoist healing practices like Qigong. Even the architecture maintains harmony with the environment. Roofs shaped like mountain silhouettes, stone paths that curve like flowing rivers. Laojun Mountain is not just a wonder of nature, nor solely a relic of ancient religion. It is both, and more. It's a metaphysical threshold, an embodiment of the Daoist principle of unity between humankind and nature. It's where tourists gasp at the view and sages search for enlightenment. Where you can lose your breath not from altitude alone, but from the raw beauty that surrounds you. Few places in the world feel this otherworldly yet so tangibly real. In Laojun, the unreal becomes accessible, seen through golden light, touched along mossy staircases, and heard in the sighing wind between old pines. Nestled in the eastern foothills of China's vast Huai River basin, Mount Langya, Langyashan, in Anhui Province stands as a poetic convergence of natural beauty, cultural significance, and timeless tranquility. Though not one of China's tallest mountains, it holds a commanding presence through the sheer charm of its pine-clad cliffs, cascading waterfalls, ancient pavilions, and serpentine walkways etched along vertiginous stone faces. Langyashan is not a mountain that shouts for attention. It beckons with gentle grace, offering an immersive experience into the subtle elegance of Chinese landscape and spirit. The name Langya translates to Wolf's Tooth Mountain, possibly alluding to the jagged, canine-like peaks that punctuate its skyline, or perhaps reflecting its long association with loyalty and perseverance, virtues extolled in classical Chinese literature. Rising only about 1,000 meters above sea level, Langyashan nonetheless feels much loftier, its craggy promontories and panoramic views giving the impression of standing on the edge of the heavens. The mountain is a favorite among poets, artists, and pilgrims, drawn by both its aesthetic inspiration and the quiet depth of its historical echoes. Langya's most iconic feature is its dense pine forest, which cloaks the mountain slopes like a verdant robe. These hardy trees cling to cliffs and grow in improbable clusters along narrow ledges and rock faces, their twisted trunks and wind-shaped branches adding to the mountain's mystical silhouette. Especially in the early morning mist or under a fresh dusting of winter snow, the pines appear as if painted by a Tang dynasty brush, evoking classic Chinese ink wash scrolls brought vividly to life. Their needles whisper in the mountain breeze, creating a natural soundscape that is both soothing and ancient. Among the trees and cliffs lie a network of cliffside walkways, exquisitely engineered wooden and stone paths that hug the sheer rock walls, offering dramatic vantage points over the valleys and gorges below. These walkways, sometimes no wider than a person's shoulders, provide heart-stopping views, especially at places like the Langya Pavilion, which juts out over a precipice and affords a panoramic spectacle of the surrounding Anhui countryside. The sensation of walking these paths, suspended between earth and sky, surrounded by chirping cicadas and the scent of pine resin, is nothing short of surreal. At certain times of year, the cliffs become partially obscured by rising fog or clouds, turning the entire mountain into a floating isle above a white ocean. But Mount Langya's allure is not just in its natural drama. It is steeped in centuries of cultural and literary resonance, most notably through its connection to the Langya Pavilion records, Langya Geg, compiled during the Northern Song dynasty. This work became an important historiographical text, and the original Langya Pavilion, though rebuilt multiple times, remains a cherished monument to the enduring scholarship and political philosophy of Imperial China. The present-day pavilion is a three-tiered wooden structure with sweeping eaves and red lacquered columns, often framed by the blazing orange of maple leaves in autumn. Not far from the pavilion is the Langya Temple, a serene Buddhist retreat with prayer halls, drum towers, and incense burners that have blackened over centuries of use. Monks in ochre robes still chant in the early mornings, their voices echoing faintly down the stone steps and forest paths. Pilgrims and tourists alike pause here to reflect, their journeys not just physical ascents of the mountain, but inward quests for stillness and clarity. Water is another central element in Langya's mystique. Numerous waterfalls tumble down its steep faces, some hidden deep within forested ravines, others splashing into shallow pools near popular trails. The Pearl Curtain waterfall is particularly renowned, where thin streams of water fall in shimmering strands, resembling a beaded curtain as they catch the sunlight. In the rainy season, the sound of rushing water joins the chorus of birds and wind, filling the air with an energy that seems to animate the stone and foliage themselves. Throughout the seasons, Mount Langya transforms. In spring, cherry blossoms and wildflowers carpet the lower slopes, while clouds of pollen dance on warm breezes. Summer cloaks the mountain in deep green, with the scent of damp earth and pine hanging heavy in the humid air. Autumn, perhaps the most spectacular time to visit, sets the landscape ablaze with fiery reds, oranges, and golds, a palette that glows under the low sun and reflects in still mountain pools. Winter brings a quiet austerity, bare branches, snow-capped pines, and icicles forming delicate chandeliers along cave mouths and overhanging rocks. Langyashan also holds a prominent place in modern Chinese popular culture. It gained renewed attention thanks to its central role in the fictionalized TV drama Nirvana in Fire, which, although loosely based on historical narratives, uses Langya Pavilion as a symbol of integrity, wisdom, and strategic prowess. As a result, new generations have come to associate the mountain with a romanticized vision of loyalty, sacrifice, and noble solitude, further reinforcing its mythical aura. Accessibility has improved over the years, and visitors today can take cable cars partway up the mountain, though many still prefer to hike the ancient staircases that lead from the valley floor to the highest points. These stone paths are flanked by carved steles and stone lions, some eroded to near featurelessness, and others bearing clear inscriptions invoking the mountain's protective spirits or commemorating famous visitors. It is not uncommon to encounter calligraphers or painters along the way, quietly working with brushes and ink, attempting to capture the mountain's shifting light or the elegance of a distant ridgeline. Despite increasing tourist infrastructure, Langya retains an aura of untouched serenity. Development has been carefully managed to preserve its ecological and cultural integrity. Environmental protections are in place to safeguard rare plant species, and the local wildlife, ranging from squirrels and civets to peregrine falcons, continues to thrive in the less disturbed corners of the mountain. There is a particular moment that stays with many who visit Langyashan, just before sunset, when the sun begins to dip behind the distant hills and the mountains are bathed in golden light. The walkways take on a soft glow, the cliff faces blush with warmth, and the pines cast long, lyrical shadows across the rocks. In that hour, silence deepens, and the mountain feels suspended in time, neither past nor present, neither wholly earthly nor divine. That quiet, that beauty, that feeling of being surrounded by something larger, something almost sacred, is what makes Mount Langya one of the most unreal places on the planet. In the subtropical heart of southern China, just beyond the bustling urban core of Guangzhou, rises a mountain whose name evokes serenity and grace, Mount Baiyun, or White Cloud Mountain. A treasured natural refuge for centuries, this mountain is where city dwellers and travelers alike have come to seek respite, breathe crisp air, and admire views that shift between the pastoral and the futuristic. Despite being surrounded by one of China's most dynamic metropolises, Baiyunshan, as it's known locally, feels like stepping into a serene landscape scroll, especially when its ridges are cloaked in the clouds from which it takes its name. Mount Baiyun is not just one peak, but a scenic area made up of over 30 mountain ridges and sub-peaks, the tallest of which is Moxing Ridge, reaching an elevation of about 382 meters. While this altitude might seem modest compared to the towering giants of Tibet or Yunnan, the panoramic impact is striking, especially considering how it rises abruptly from Guangzhou's urban sprawl. From the summit, the contrast is surreal. On one side, the bustling, glass-wrapped skyline of the city sprawls endlessly into the Pearl River Delta. On the other, lush forests, winding paths, and calm lakes spread like a green sanctuary. What makes Mount Baiyun so profoundly unreal is its ever-changing atmospheric cloak. True to its name, which translates to White Cloud Mountain, the peaks are frequently draped in ethereal mists, especially in the early mornings or after a rainfall. These clouds roll gently over the mountaintops and through the trees, wrapping the landscape in silver gauze. The phenomenon, known locally as Baiyun Chujiao, the first light on White Cloud Mountain, is revered by poets and painters alike. As dawn breaks and golden light pours over the peaks, the mists swirl and part, revealing glimpses of forested ridges, temple roofs, and cityscapes that flicker in and out of view like dream fragments. Historically, Mount Baiyun has long been considered one of the 8 scenic spots of Guangzhou, and it has captivated visitors for over a millennium. During the Tang and Song dynasties, it was a destination for scholars and monks, many of whom left behind poems etched into cliff faces and calligraphic inscriptions on stone tablets. These ancient verses speak of longing, retreat, and transcendence, testaments to the mountain's power to stir reflection and soul-searching. Baiyunshan was also favored by emperors and officials, some of whom constructed pavilions and gardens to contemplate both the heavens above and the cities below. Modern visitors to Baiyunshan are greeted with a landscape that balances preservation with accessibility. The mountain is laced with stone stairways, paved trails, and cable cars, allowing both casual tourists and serious hikers to explore its wooded reaches. The scenic plank road, a narrow cliffside path clinging to the western slope of the mountain, is among the most popular routes. It offers panoramic views of the city beneath while skimming the edge of steep forested cliffs, an exhilarating experience as clouds pass directly below your feet and birds ride the updrafts near eye level. Scattered throughout the mountain are ancient temples and cultural relics, many of which blend seamlessly into the terrain. The Nungren Temple, built during the Tang dynasty, is one of the most significant, still active with Buddhist monks who chant amid incense smoke and lantern light. Here, visitors can pause among red-painted halls, bronze bells, and serene courtyards flanked by ancient trees, feeling as though they've entered a sanctuary suspended in time. Even the temple's bells seem to reverberate through the fog itself, carrying prayers through the dense canopy of pine and camphor trees. For those interested in botany and ecology, Baiyunshan is a miniature haven of subtropical biodiversity. The forests are rich with native plant life, evergreens, flowering shrubs, and thick bamboo groves. In spring, magnolias, azaleas, and cherry blossoms bloom in dazzling bursts of pink, white, and red, attracting flocks of butterflies and birds. The mountain is home to a surprising number of animal species, including squirrels, colorful birds, frogs, and insects, despite its proximity to an urban area. In contrast to this natural abundance is the mountain's striking view of Guangzhou, one of the most dynamic and sprawling cities in China. From the viewing platforms atop Moxing Ridge or along the cliffside walkways, one can gaze down at the shimmering Canton Tower, the weaving highways, the gleam of steel skyscrapers, and the ribbon of the Pearl River reflecting the city's neon pulse. This juxtaposition of ancient tranquility and futuristic energy is uniquely disorienting, like watching two centuries coexist in a single glance. Adding to the surreal experience are the art installations and light displays that have, in recent years, been integrated subtly into the landscape. At night, parts of the mountain glow with ambient lighting, illuminating the trees, temples, and pathways in soft hues of blue, gold, and violet. During certain festivals, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival or Lunar New Year, the mountain is decorated with lanterns and traditional ornaments, transforming it into a dreamlike terrain that merges folklore and festivity with nature and mysticism. And yet, despite these embellishments, Mount Baiyun has retained its soulful quietness. Its identity has not been overwritten by commercialization but has evolved with the surrounding city. For locals, it remains a cherished place for morning Tai Chi, family picnics, romantic walks, and personal pilgrimage. Elderly residents climb its paths as a form of daily meditation. Artists sketch the curves of the forest. Children chase butterflies between tea houses and koi ponds. Even amidst the growing hum of the city, the mountain offers a profound reminder of slowness, of reflection, of breath. There is something timeless about watching fog rise over a modern skyline, of seeing temple eaves peeking out from the forest, of hearing chants and cicadas in the same earful of sound. Mount Baiyun is not merely a beautiful spot, it is an unreal place because it refuses to belong to one era or one world. It blends the mythic with the modern, the sacred with the secular, the wild with the structured. It allows visitors to step away from the intensity of the urban present and into a contemplative dream space, where clouds drift like thoughts and the mountain itself listens in silence. In this duality, between past and present, nature and city, heaven and earth, Mount Baiyun stands quietly, humbly, impossibly, real and unreal all at once. Rising like a surreal sculpture from the emerald valleys of northern Guangdong, Mount Danxia, also known as Danxia Shan, presents one of the most visually arresting landscapes in all of China. Imagine a terrain painted in warm shades of crimson and rust, carved into towering cliffs, rounded ridges, and bizarre monolithic outcrops that seem plucked from the surface of another planet. The formations are so distinct, so strikingly unlike the traditional granite mountains of eastern China, that the term Danxia landform has become a scientific designation used globally to describe this type of red sandstone and conglomerate terrain. And here, at Danxia Shan, lies the phenomenon's birthplace, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a place that seems to blur the boundaries between geology, myth, and dream. What makes Mount Danxia so surreal is not just its geological uniqueness, but the startling contrast between its fiery hues and the lush subtropical forests that drape over and around it. These rose-red cliffs rise abruptly from a green sea of bamboo, tea fields, and winding rivers, sculpted over millions of years by the persistent forces of wind and water. The result is a natural gallery of pillars, ravines, caves, natural bridges, and isolated towers, each seeming to defy both gravity and logic. Among them, certain formations have become icons, often named for their anthropomorphic shapes or mythical allusions. The Sleeping Beauty, Yang Yuan Stone, the Male Stone, Yin Yuan Stone, the Female Stone, and Breast Peak are just a few, each cloaked in folklore that gives the mountain an almost mischievous, sentient personality. The origin of these landscapes dates back over 100 million years, when what is now southern China was a basin of lakes and rivers. Sediments rich in iron oxides settled into layers, creating the deep red color that defines the Danxia stone. Over the eons, tectonic uplift pushed these layers skyward, and erosion carved them into their current fantastical forms. Walking among them today feels like navigating the fossilized imagination of the earth itself. Grooves and arches smoothed by time, towering cliffs splashed with color, and stone ridges so thin and curved they appear to be drawn by a giant's hand. Visitors typically begin their journey at Jinjiang River, the lifeblood of the Danxia landscape, whose jade-green waters curve sinuously through the region, flanked by vertical walls that soar hundreds of meters above. Boat rides along the river offer one of the most cinematic introductions to the area. As you drift past these vertical rock faces, often shrouded in early morning mist, the river acts like a mirror, doubling the spectacle and turning the entire valley into an amphitheater of reflections. In the quietude of the morning, broken only by birdsong and the ripple of water, it feels less like travel and more like floating through a lucid dream. Among the most visited features of Danxiashan is the Yang Yuan stone, a strikingly phallic monolith that rises over 28 meters high from a rocky pedestal. Nearby, the Yin Yuan stone, said to resemble female anatomy, balances the symbolic representation. While these formations are often the subject of humor among visitors, in Daoist tradition they represent the cosmic balance of yin and yang, the harmonious duality that governs the universe. Indeed, many temples are scattered across the Danxia range, some clinging precariously to cliff faces, others nestled within natural alcoves, further enhancing the mountain's mystical ambience. One of the most atmospheric is Biechuan Temple, built into a grotto in the 6th century during the Liang dynasty. Its ancient halls and staircases wind through narrow crevices and open onto dramatic balconies that overlook the surrounding valley. Here, incense coils smolder quietly in the damp air, and the rhythmic chants of monks reverberate against red stone walls. It is not uncommon to stand within these sacred spaces and feel that time has slowed, that the stone itself is humming with memory and meaning. The hiking trails of Danxiashan offer experiences for every level of explorer. For the casual visitor, Zhonglao Peak is accessible via a winding stairway and rewards with panoramic views of the entire park, a landscape of flame-colored ridges, forested basins, and the distant shimmer of the river. For the more adventurous, narrow ledges and steel ladders snake up cliff faces to more remote summits like Bazhai Village, where terraced farms overlook the otherworldly terrain below. Along these paths, walkers are rewarded not only with views but with rare flora and fauna. Danxia's unique microclimate fosters subtropical biodiversity, including over 400 species of plants and endangered animals such as the Chinese pangolin and clouded leopard. In spring, wildflowers bloom in cracks and crevices of the red rock, coloring the cliffs in dabs of purple, yellow, and white. In the wet season, small waterfalls trickle down ravines, filling hidden pools that shimmer beneath the sun. And in the fall, the forests below blaze with fiery leaves, complementing the rust red of the rocks above in a symphony of autumnal tones. But it is perhaps in winter, when the frost dusts the highest ledges and mists linger longer in the valleys, that Danxiashan becomes its most ghostly and sublime. Then, the landscape seems to breathe, clouds spilling over peaks like smoke from ancient dragon mouths. Despite its mythic aura, Mount Danxia is remarkably accessible, located just a few hours by train from Guangzhou or Shenzhen. Infrastructure around the area has been carefully designed to minimize ecological disruption, with shuttle buses, electric carts, and pedestrian paths helping manage the flow of visitors. Interpretation centers provide geological and cultural context, ensuring that those who come to marvel also come to understand. In recent years, ecotourism efforts have focused on sustainable visitor practices, and preservation laws strictly protect the landscape from overdevelopment or defacement. Yet even with its growing popularity, Mount Danxia retains an aura of sacred stillness. Part of this is due to the local cultural identity, which reveres the land not only for its visual impact but for its spiritual significance. For the local Yao and Han communities, the mountain is alive, a guardian, a teacher, a witness. Ceremonies are still held during solstices and harvests. Songs are sung in dialects nearly extinct elsewhere. Old legends passed down for centuries still shape how locals interact with the land. And perhaps it's this reverence that keeps Danxiashan from feeling like just another tourist destination. It is not just a photo backdrop, it is a place to be contemplated, honored, and felt. Standing atop one of its highest ridges at sunset, as the light fades and the red stone turns to violet under the deepening sky, it becomes clear why Mount Danxia is often described as unreal. It is not only its color, its shape, or even its vast antiquity that creates this impression. It's the way it defies expectation, how it holds memory in stone, and how it asks you to slow down, to listen, and to truly see. Here, in this carved and wind-worn cathedral of crimson cliffs, Earth reveals both its artistry and its soul. Deep in the mist-veiled highlands of Sichuan province, where bamboo forests breathe in the humid mountain air and cicadas sing among ancient pines, lies Mount Qingcheng, a sanctuary not just of nature, but of philosophy, myth, and inner stillness. Known in Chinese as Qingcheng Shan, which poetically translates to Green City Mountain, this profoundly lush and spiritual landscape has long been considered one of the birthplaces of Taoism, one of China's indigenous philosophical and religious traditions. For over 2 millennia, it has attracted seekers, sages, poets, and pilgrims, all drawn to its green ridges, moss-covered paths, and hidden temples where the lines between body and spirit, earth and sky, seem to dissolve. Mount Qingcheng is not defined by jagged peaks or dramatic elevation. It rises to a modest height of around 1,260 meters, but by a deep and all-encompassing sense of serenity. Its slopes are cloaked in evergreen vegetation, fed by mountain mists and frequent rain, making it appear perpetually wrapped in shades of green. From afar, the mountain ridges ripple like waves of jade, and up close, every rock, step, and shrine is softened by layers of velvety moss. There's an intimacy to Qingcheng that contrasts with China's loftier mountains. It embraces rather than overpowers, draws you in rather than makes you small. It is the mountain of introspection. The mountain is divided into Front Mountain, Qianshan, and Back Mountain, Huzhan, each offering distinct experiences. The Front Mountain is more accessible and houses the main temples and relics of Daoist heritage, while the Back Mountain is wilder, more forested, and less frequented, ideal for those seeking solitude and communion with nature. The journey through Front Mountain often begins at the foot of the slope where the Shangqing Palace cableway leads partway up the ascent. Yet many pilgrims and traditionalists choose to walk, climbing centuries-old stone stairways that wind gently through bamboo groves and underhanging vines. As you ascend, the mountain reveals itself slowly, ancient pavilions peeking through the foliage, stone bridges arched over clear brooks, and mossy steps that seem to spiral not only up the mountain but inward into one's own thoughts. At the heart of the mountain lies Shangqing Palace, the main temple complex perched amidst towering cypress trees. Originally built during the Jin dynasty and rebuilt multiple times due to war and weather, it remains a powerful monument to Daoist tradition. Its red walls, curved roofs with glazed tiles, and incense-filled courtyards seem suspended in timeless silence. Monks in flowing grey robes sweep leaves in the morning, burn incense before altar deities, and chant scriptures that echo through stone halls and pine boughs. Here, the Tao, the Way, is not just an abstract idea, but a living presence, reflected in every leaf, every droplet on a mossy tile, every gust of wind rustling through the bamboo. The temple is dedicated to the Three Pure Ones, the supreme deities in Taoism, but also honors Zhong Daoling, the first celestial master and considered the founder of organized Daoist religion. According to legend, Zhong Daoling retreated to Mount Qingcheng around the 2nd century CE to meditate and teach, establishing the way of the celestial masters, Qianshi Dao. His presence is said to linger in the mountain's quiet, in the still waters of its springs, and in the gentle mists that curl around its slopes at dawn. Moving beyond Shangqing Palace, one encounters a series of smaller, equally atmospheric temples, shrines, and grottos, each seemingly tucked into the folds of the mountain like secrets waiting to be discovered. Qianshi Cave, believed to be where Zhong Daoling first practiced alchemy and meditation, is carved directly into the rock. Inside, flickering candles light the faces of stone-carved immortals and talisman-inscribed walls, while outside, prayer ribbons flutter in the breeze from tree branches like crimson leaves. Visitors often tie these ribbons with handwritten wishes, calls for health, wisdom, harmony, or love, and leave them in the care of the mountain and the Tao. Perhaps the most breathtaking aspect of Mount Qingcheng is its atmospheric alchemy, the way light, sound, and movement conspire to create an environment that feels truly otherworldly. In the early morning, mists drift through the trees, softening the edges of temples and turning the forest into a watercolor wash of greens and grays. Water trickles constantly, down steps, from springs, across small stone gutters, creating a soothing, omnipresent rhythm that follows visitors like a whispered mantra. Birds call from the treetops, and occasionally a monkey or civet darts across the path, disappearing into a thicket of bamboo. Nature is never separate from the sacred here. It is the sacred. In Daoist thought, the natural world is not something to be conquered or transcended, but something to flow with, to harmonize with. Mount Qingcheng embodies this worldview in every element of its design. The temples are built in accord with the mountain's curves. No tree is felled unless necessary. No path is laid that breaks the natural energy flow of the land. Even the feng shui principles that guide the architecture are aimed at preserving the qi, the life force, of the place. Venturing into the back mountain offers a wilder, more solitary version of Qingcheng. Here, the trails are steeper and less structured, the vegetation denser. The Five Dragon Gorge, Peach Blossom Stream, and Zushi Temple are tucked deeper into the forest, often shrouded in quiet and untouched by crowds. This side of the mountain feels more like walking through an ancient forest primeval, ferns brushing your legs, moss slick underfoot, and the occasional ruin or stone statue half consumed by vines and time. It is here that the philosophical core of Taoism, simplicity, humility, and union with nature, feels most present, most alive. Mount Qingqing's allure has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film. It has been celebrated by Tang and Song poets for its seclusion from the dust of the world, and even today, visitors describe it as a place where time dissolves. In more recent years, it featured prominently in cultural tourism efforts and even inspired elements of the animated landscapes in films like Kung Fu Panda 3, where its visual DNA can be seen in the serene temples and towering peaks of the Panda Village. Despite its long history and increased accessibility, Mount Qingcheng has managed to avoid the overcrowding and commercialization that afflicts some of China's sacred mountains. Much of this is due to strict conservation efforts and the reverence locals maintain for the site. The area has been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, both for its natural and cultural significance, especially when considered alongside the nearby Dujiangyan irrigation system, an ancient feat of engineering that symbolizes the Daoist ideal of working with nature rather than against it. There is a moment familiar to many who walk these trails, perhaps late in the afternoon, when the light filters gold through pine branches, and all that can be heard is the hush of wind and the lap of water against stone. You sit on a worn bench near a temple gate. You drink tea brewed from spring water, and for a while, you feel not like a visitor to the mountain, but like part of it. You breathe not against the world, but with it. That, above all, is what makes Mount Qingcheng one of the most unreal places on Earth. It is not the grandest or the most remote. It is not dramatic in scale or extreme in altitude, but it is a place where nature and thought have danced in harmony for over 2,000 years. Where clouds drift through pine needles like silk scarves. Where stone steps wind upward like a spiral of meditation. Where the Tao, that ever-elusive path, is not something to be found, but something to be remembered, because you feel, unmistakably, that it has always been here. In the northeastern reaches of China, where the long winters breathe frost into pine needles and autumn ignites the hills in a blaze of crimson and gold, lies a mountain steeped in both natural splendor and ancient mystery. Mount Phoenix, or Fenghuangshan, in Lianing Province. Rising above the borderland forests near the city of Dandong, this enchanting peak takes its name from the legendary phoenix, a mythical bird symbolizing rebirth, peace, and immortality in Chinese mythology. The name is no coincidence. Mount Phoenix truly embodies a sense of the ethereal, the magical, the transcendent, making it one of the most unreal places on Earth. From a distance, Fenghuang Mountain resembles the form of a great bird with its wings spread wide, an illusion enhanced by the mountain's ridged, undulating terrain. With an elevation of over 800 meters, it is not the tallest mountain in China, but few rival its seasonal beauty and mystical atmosphere. The forest cover that blankets its slopes changes throughout the year in such a vivid and dramatic way that locals say each visit shows a different mountain. In spring, delicate blossoms and the first green buds give it a gentle, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Summer wraps it in a lush, humid canopy of deep greens, birdsong, and rushing streams. Autumn, however, is when Mount Phoenix erupts into brilliance. The foliage transforms into a living canvas of reds, oranges, and golds, making it one of the most popular spots in the northeast for fall viewing. Then, as winter descends, snow dusts its ridges and temple roofs, turning the landscape into a quiet, crystalline world straight out of a classical Chinese ink painting. But the mystique of Mount Phoenix runs far deeper than its seasonal displays. It is a place saturated with legend and lore, known for its mystical energy and long-standing spiritual significance. According to ancient tales, the mountain was once the resting place of a celestial phoenix that descended to earth to drink from the pure mountain springs. The bird found the mountain so peaceful and beautiful that it never left, eventually transforming into the mountain itself. As such, the mountain is revered as sacred ground, a place where heaven and earth touch and where those with clear hearts might still glimpse echoes of that legendary creature in the clouds, wind, and fire-colored leaves. Spiritual seekers and pilgrims have journeyed to Fenghuangshan for centuries, especially to visit its temples and hermitages nestled high in the forested ridges. Among the most significant is the Phoenix Temple, perched halfway up the mountain. Though rebuilt many times over the centuries, it still exudes a timeless air of reverence. The structure features traditional wooden beams, ornate painted eaves, and bells that chime gently in the mountain breeze. Inside, golden statues of Guanyin and Buddhist arhats glow in candlelight, and the smell of incense hangs thick in the air. Monks in saffron robes sweep the stone steps at dawn, chanting softly as morning fog curls around the temple grounds. Visitors often come not only to pray or meditate, but simply to sit and breathe, to feel the peace that seems to emanate from the stone itself. But the mysticism of Mount Phoenix is not confined to its temples. The mountain is rich with unusual rock formations, hidden caves, and sacred springs, each accompanied by its own legend or spiritual significance. The Celestial Footprint is one such formation, a large indentation in a stone slab said to have been left by a god who stepped onto the earth from the heavens. Nearby, the Dragon Pool, a serene, circular basin of water hidden deep within the forest, is believed to be the dwelling place of a guardian spirit, and locals still toss coins into it while making silent wishes. Another famed feature is the Nine Dragons Waterfall, a series of cascading streams that tumble over moss-covered rocks, named for the myth that 9 dragons once came to bathe here. In the rainy season, the waterfalls grow wild and thunderous, misting the surrounding trails and creating rainbows in the sun. In winter, they freeze into stunning icicles that shimmer like crystal curtains, adding to the mountain's magical wintertime persona. Perhaps the most transcendent experiences come while walking the forest trails that zigzag up the mountain slopes. These paths are shaded by ancient pines and maple trees, lined with weathered stone steps, and occasionally broken by open clearings that offer breathtaking views of the Liaodong Peninsula stretching out in every direction. On clear days, one can even glimpse the Yalu River in the distance, which marks the border between China and North Korea. The changing light through the trees, the play of wind on leaves, and the sounds of rustling branches and far-off birds create an immersive atmosphere where the mountain seems not just alive but aware, as though it watches each traveler pass and whispers secrets in the rustle of every pine needle. Autumn in Mount Phoenix deserves particular emphasis, for during these weeks the mountain is transformed into a transcendent riot of color and light. The maples and sumac trees turn flaming red, golden yellow, and deep orange, creating tunnels of glowing foliage over stone steps and pagoda walkways. Early morning mists catch the slanting sunlight, creating golden beams through the forest like divine spotlights. It's a phenomenon that is neither fully natural nor fully supernatural. It exists in that liminal space between the two, where beauty feels too intentional to be random, yet too effortless to be crafted. Despite its sacred reputation, Mount Phoenix is also remarkably welcoming. Modern visitors can access much of the mountain through a combination of well-maintained trails, stone staircases, and cable cars, allowing both spiritual pilgrims and casual hikers to enjoy its treasures. Tea houses are tucked along the pathways, offering hot chrysanthemum tea, steamed buns, and a place to sit and take in the scenery. Small shops near the trailheads sell traditional herbal remedies, incense, and paper talismans meant to protect travelers from misfortune or guide them spiritually. Importantly, Fenghuang Mountain has retained its identity amid growing tourism. Strict preservation policies, ecological protections, and community involvement have ensured that the mountain remains largely unspoiled. Locals take immense pride in its heritage, not only as a source of cultural identity, but as a living organism to be respected and cared for. Rangers patrol the trails daily, ensuring cleanliness and safety, while monks and volunteers maintain the temples and sacred sites with meticulous care. Festivals like the Autumn Maple Festival are celebrated not with raucous crowds but with poetry recitations, flute music, and tea ceremonies held in forest pavilions. Ultimately, what makes Mount Phoenix so unreal is its atmosphere, a kind of spiritual density that's impossible to measure or explain. It is in the way the forest absorbs sound, the way the wind seems to carry memory, the way every leaf and rock feels touched by ancient hands. There's a quietness here that doesn't feel empty, but full of stories, full of time, full of presence. It is a place where the natural and mythical intertwine, where the phoenix, though unseen, still seems to rise in the curling mist and the golden fire of fall leaves. For those who climb its paths, Mount Phoenix offers not just a view from the top, but a journey inward, a rare invitation to walk not only through a mountain, but through a legend. Tucked away in the western edge of Anhui Province, far from the well-trodden paths of tourist-saturated scenic spots, lies a mountain realm that whispers rather than shouts, veils rather than reveals, yet leaves a profound and lasting impression upon all who walk its ancient paths. Mount Tianzhu, or Heavenly Pillar Mountain. Often referred to as the quieter cousin of the iconic Mount Huangshan, Tianzhu shares many of the same sublime features. Dramatic granite peaks, seas of clouds, twisted pines clinging to rock faces, but with a serenity and rawness that feels even more untouched, even more sacred. Its very name evokes myth, a pillar of heaven, a place where earth rises to meet sky, where the divine might descend in the hush of early morning mist. With its highest peak soaring to 1,488 meters, Mount Tianzhu is both a physical and symbolic pinnacle. The mountain is carved of ancient granite, weathered over millions of years into towering cliffs, narrow spires, and smooth stone domes that rise above deep gorges and green valleys. These formations seem sculpted by the hands of gods rather than the mechanisms of geology. There are stones that balance impossibly on tiny bases, natural arches that frame views of sky and forest, and pillars that stand in silent formation like watchmen of an ancient order. It is little wonder that Chinese painters, monks, and philosophers have for centuries described this mountain as not just a place, but a presence, majestic, watchful, and eternal. Unlike the more heavily commercialized and accessible Mount Huangshan to the east, Tianzhu remains remote and relatively undervisited, offering a more meditative, less curated experience. The landscape is wilder, the trails more rugged, and the atmosphere saturated with the quiet of undisturbed nature. It is a mountain of sudden silences, unexpected clearings, and narrow trails that disappear into mist and re-emerge in other worlds. One does not conquer Mount Tianzhu, it permits passage, if one is quiet and observant enough to earn it. The mountain is divided into three main sections: the Heavenly Pillar Peak area, the Valley of 10,000 Pines, and the Mystic Valley, each offering unique textures of terrain and spiritual depth. At the heart of Tianzhu is the Heavenly Pillar Peak, Tianzhu Feng, itself, a towering granite monolith that pierces the sky and seems to defy gravity. On misty days, it emerges like a ghost ship from a sea of clouds, its base invisible, its summit glowing in the morning light. On clear days, one can hike to its upper ridges, where the views stretch for miles over undulating forests and distant villages, and the only sound is the cry of hawks riding the thermals between the cliffs. Climbing the stone steps that zigzag up the granite face, visitors pass beneath gnarled pine trees, many of which are centuries old, whose roots clutch the rock like ancient fingers. These Tianzhu pines, twisted and resilient, have become symbols of endurance and elegance. Like their cousins on Huangshan, they seem to grow not with logic, but with artistic defiance, leaning out from sheer walls, forming frames around distant peaks, or thrusting skyward through cracks in the stone. Among Tianzhu's many legendary features is the Flying Stone, a massive boulder said to have descended from the heavens and landed delicately upon a flat granite surface. Despite its weight and precarious position, it has rested there unmoved for centuries, defying storms and gravity alike. Local lore holds that it is the resting place of an immortal, and those who meditate nearby may receive visions or insights into the Tao. Equally fascinating is the hidden scripture cave, a narrow cleft in the mountain where monks are said to have once stored sacred texts, hidden from invading armies and the passage of time. Entering the cave requires squeezing between two walls of stone so close they barely admit a grown person. Once inside, however, the space opens into a shadowy chamber filled with cool air, echoing drips of water, and a palpable sense of ancient secrecy. Throughout the mountain, Daoist and Buddhist temples are scattered like pearls in the forest, many of them small and humble, partially reclaimed by moss and ivy. The most prominent among them is the Zhanren Temple, built during the Jin dynasty and dedicated to the cultivation of truth and balance. Monks still reside there, their morning prayers echoing off the surrounding rock walls, their lives shaped by the rhythm of wind, cloud, and silence. Visitors are welcome to light incense, drink spring water drawn from the mountain's heart, and leave offerings of rice or fruit upon the stone altars. Perhaps the most mystical experience on Mount Tianzhu comes during the early morning hours, when the sea of clouds phenomenon occurs. On certain days, especially following a night of rain or mist, the mountain peaks rise above a billowing white expanse of fog, as if they were islands in a drifting sky ocean. The sun rises slowly behind them, lighting the clouds in gold and violet hues. Shadows stretch across the sky. The world below vanishes. It is a view so transcendent, so disorienting in its beauty, that many visitors report the feeling of stepping into a dream, of no longer knowing what is solid and what is spirit. The autumn months bring another kind of magic to Tianzhu. As the leaves turn to brilliant oranges, crimsons, and yellows, the granite faces of the mountain reflect their hues, creating a fire-like glow across the ridges. This seasonal shift, combined with the sharp mountain air and the golden quality of autumn sunlight, gives the impression of walking through a landscape scroll, painted not with brush and ink, but with fire and breath. Despite its remoteness, Mount Tianzhu has increasingly become recognized for its cultural and ecological importance. It is part of the UNESCO Global Geoparks Network, not only for its stunning geomorphology but for the rich biodiversity that thrives in its forests and ravines. Endemic species of orchids, rare medicinal herbs, birds, and butterflies fill the mountain's understory. Environmental protection zones have been established to preserve these species, and sustainable tourism efforts are strictly enforced. Cable cars exist for accessibility, but many routes require traditional hiking, ensuring that the sanctity of the environment is not lost to convenience. Tianzhu's literary and philosophical heritage also runs deep. Poets of the Tang and Song dynasties visited and wrote of the mountain, comparing its silent cliffs to the stillness of the mind in meditation. In Daoist texts, Tianzhu is sometimes referenced as a site where the veil between worlds is thin, where one might, through solitude and reflection, cross into realms of deeper wisdom. This legacy continues today, as artists, scholars, and seekers return to the mountain to rediscover what the ancients understood, that Tianzhu is not merely a collection of rock and tree, but a mirror of the soul. Standing atop one of its quiet peaks, with wind whispering through pine branches and sunlight playing across the stone, it becomes clear why Mount Tianzhu is considered unreal. It defies expectations, not because it is bizarre or extreme, but because it is quietly, overwhelmingly complete. It offers all the grandeur of China's famous sacred mountains, yet with a stillness that feels more intimate, more personal, more ancient. In its forests, one hears forgotten names. In its shadows, one senses the eternal. And in the hush of the mountaintop, where clouds drift beneath your feet and time slows to a breath, you come to understand. Mount Tianzhu does not imitate heaven, it is heaven, anchored to the earth in stone and pine. Just beyond the frantic rhythm of Beijing's crowded avenues and monumental avenues of imperial grandeur, nestled quietly in the western suburbs of the capital, rises a mountain whose presence is subtle but spiritually resonant, Mount Miaofeng. Known for its rolling ridges, crisp pine forests, and historic temples, this sacred peak has for centuries stood as a spiritual escape for urban dwellers and a destination for pilgrims, mystics, and seekers of divine favor. Though it lacks the soaring, jagged grandeur of western China's Himalayan ranges or the crimson cliffs of southern Danxia formations, Mount Miaofeng possesses a different kind of power, one grounded in ritual, memory, and the collective breath of generations. Mount Miaofeng, which reaches a height of about 1,300 meters, is part of the Taihang mountain range's eastern tail, and is often described as the back door to Beijing, both geographically and metaphysically. It occupies a rare and precious place in Chinese spiritual geography as the closest sacred mountain to the capital, and its proximity has shaped centuries of worship and cultural life. The mountain's name, translating to marvelous peak or mystic peak, hints at its long association with divine presence, especially in connection to Daoist and folk religious practices. The mountain's significance is most visibly enshrined in its temple complexes, especially the famed pilgrimage temple to the Azure Cloud Empress, Bixia Yuanjun. Also referred to as Nyangnyang Temple, this complex, set against the backdrop of sweeping forested slopes and granite outcrops, has been the heart of spiritual activity on the mountain for over 1,000 years. The goddess venerated here, often associated with fertility, destiny, and protection, was traditionally worshipped by those seeking children, health, and good fortune. Over the dynastic centuries, her appeal expanded to include merchants, craftspeople, and common folk, many of whom undertook long treks to her mountain shrine in hopes of altering their fates. What makes Mount Miaofeng unreal is the intensity of human devotion it has seen across time, especially during the peak of its fame in the Ming and Qing dynasties, when annual pilgrimages became massive cultural events. Known as the Miaofengshan Pilgrimage Fair, this tradition dates back to at least the 15th century and still continues in various forms today. During the height of the pilgrimage season, often in late spring, thousands would embark on a journey to the mountain, walking dozens of kilometers over several days from central Beijing and surrounding villages. Along the way, they would be accompanied by folk bands, lion dances, acrobats, and storytellers, turning the spiritual endeavor into a moving cultural spectacle. Processions wound through dusty roads and mountain paths, flags fluttering, gongs ringing, incense thickening the air. Pilgrims carried offerings, red candles, clay figurines, symbolic paper money, and bright silk banners bearing messages of gratitude or supplication. The soundscape would be a mixture of flute melodies, chant, and the low murmur of prayer, all converging as they ascended the final, winding trail to the summit temple. Even today, remnants of this festival can still be witnessed, especially during the annual temple fair held in the 4th lunar month. Locals recreate the old rites, laying incense before the goddess, presenting theatrical performances in temple courtyards, and sharing communal meals in the stone courtyards and stairways of the complex. For those attuned to history, it's like stepping into a river of cultural continuity, walking alongside ancestors, breathing their prayers, honoring the same forces they believed governed their lives. Architecturally, the Nyangnyang Temple complex is a wonder of its own. With red-painted wooden halls, stone terraces, and dragon-headed eaves, it rises in tiers along the mountainside like a stepped fortress of faith. Age-old pine trees twist around its perimeters, and stone lanterns stand sentry at the gates, softened by centuries of lichen and weather. The scent of incense lingers in every corner, mingling with the mountain air and drifting upward through the open windows of sanctuaries where bronze statues shine in the dim light of devotion. One of the most compelling parts of a visit is ascending the famed 108 Steps of Enlightenment, an ancient stone stairway that leads from the lower terraces of the temple to the summit platform. Each step is said to correspond with a mortal desire or attachment, and climbing them is not just a physical act, but a ritual of shedding, a journey toward clarity and spiritual stillness. The top offers more than just vistas. It offers a moment of silence, of height above the din of human struggle, where the city lies distant and muffled, and only wind and memory remain. Beyond the temples, Mount Miaofeng's trails wind through pine-covered slopes, hidden grottos, and open ridges that offer panoramic views of Beijing's northern plains. On clear days, the Forbidden City and Beijing's outer ring of mountains are visible in the hazy distance, layered in silver-blue strata that look more like a watercolor than a real landscape. To walk these trails is to pass through centuries of footsteps, the silent imprints of monks, soldiers, farmers, and lovers, each leaving behind a sliver of longing in the stone. In recent decades, Mount Miaofeng has also become a beloved hiking destination for those seeking a quick escape from urban life. Well-marked paths make it accessible, and several rest points and tea stalls offer refuge to the weary. Yet even with this modern revival, the mountain has maintained its soul. It has not been overbuilt or overwhelmed. There are no garish attractions, no artificial installations, just stone, tree, air, and faith. What remains is a palpable spiritual texture, impossible to replicate and difficult to describe. It's in the sound of the wind through the pines. It's in the way the temples glow in late afternoon light. It's in the silence you feel when you pause between breaths at the top. Mount Miaofeng is a living archive. It holds stories written not in ink, but in footsteps and smoke, wind and stone. It is both a repository of communal ritual and a personal mirror, where visitors often find not just a view, but a reflection of their own longings. And though it lies just outside the capital, a short drive from the skyscrapers and subways, when you are among its temples, you could be centuries away. It is a place that time has brushed lightly, gently, as though reluctant to disturb the sacred hush that blankets its slopes. To stand at the summit at dusk, incense curling in the air, red prayer banners fluttering from pine branches, and the faint sound of temple bells echoing through the valleys, is to understand what it means for a place to feel unreal. Mount Miaofeng is not a monument of grandeur, it is a sanctuary of continuity, a mountain where memory, myth, and meaning are carved not just into its stones, but into the spirit of all who visit. Stretching like a colossal stone backbone across the provinces of Shaanxi, Hebei, and parts of Henan, the vast and formidable expanse of the Taihang Mountains, or Taihang Shan, stands not as a single peak, but as an immense mountain chain, steeped in history, carved by time, and veined with drama both geological and human. For over 2,000 years, this range has formed the natural boundary between China's Lurs Plateau to the west and the North China Plain to the east, serving as a guardian of ancient kingdoms, a muse for poets and warriors, and a site of some of the most spectacular natural terrain in all of East Asia. Within these rugged ridges and towering walls, the mountain range holds secrets that make it one of the most surreal and profound places on Earth. Unlike the poetic silhouettes of Mount Huangshan or the mystical serenity of Mount Qingcheng, The Taihang Mountains project a raw, stern beauty. Their cliffs are sheer, their gorges impossibly deep, their plateaus riddled with wind-sculpted spires, hidden waterfalls, and narrow paths etched into rock faces. This is a land of contrast. Dark green pine forests cling to blood-red cliff sides, silver streams twist through golden grasslands, and clouds often hang low, cloaking entire valleys in a ghostly breath. The effect is one of both majesty and menace. The Taihang Range feels like a place forged in struggle, where the earth cracked open and reared upward, and life took hold with claw and root. Geologically, the Taihang Mountains are ancient, composed largely of hard, resistant sandstone and limestone, which has fractured over eons into deep chasms and vertical escarpments. These rocks have been folded and faulted by tectonic activity, giving rise to the dramatic drop-offs and steep ridges that define the terrain. Massive cliff walls, sometimes rising over 1,000 meters, form natural fortresses that have inspired awe for millennia. But what makes them truly unreal is how they often appear inexplicably sculptural, like natural fortifications shaped with divine intention rather than chaotic process. One of the most breathtaking and surreal features within the range is the Taihang Grand Canyon, a deep and twisting gorge that runs through the heart of the mountains in southern Shaanxi. Here, the cliffs are stained in hues of rust and rose, while rivers glitter like snakes of light in the depths below. The canyon stretches over 100 kilometers, with cliffs towering up to 1,500 meters on either side, dwarfing any who enter its vast domain. Waterfalls tumble down its faces in the rainy season, and the air is thick with the scent of wild herbs, pine sap, and wind-scoured stone. Suspension bridges span the canyon's breadth at precarious heights, offering views so dizzying they leave visitors breathless, not just from fear or vertigo, but from the sublime. In other sections of the Taihang Range, particularly near Pingshan County and Huguan County, lie villages and ancient cliffside paths that have long defied gravity and time. Perhaps most famous among these is the Guoliang Tunnel Road, carved directly into the vertical face of a cliff by villagers using only hand tools in the 1970s. This tunnel, often called the road that does not forgive mistakes, is etched into a sheer rock wall over 1,200 meters above the valley floor, with open windows cut into the rock to provide views and light through its twisted path. Walking or driving through it is an experience unlike any other, one that fuses the raw terror of height with the astonishing human determination to adapt to impossible terrain. The Taihang Mountains are not only a marvel of nature, they are a living tapestry of China's historical and cultural legacy. In ancient times, they served as a vital military boundary. The kingdoms of Zhao, Wei, and Qi fought for control over these highlands during the Warring States period. Numerous battle sites are scattered across the ridges, often marked by overgrown stone markers and ancient fortress remains that speak of conflict long buried in the dust of history. The mountain's strategic importance made it a shield for empires and a haven for rebels. Even during the 20th century, the range became a base for guerrilla fighters during the Second Sino-Japanese War, with caves and forests hiding entire units of resistance. But the mountains are more than a battlefield. They are also a cradle of poetry, mythology, and folklore. Chinese poets, especially during the Tang and Song dynasties, often reference the Taihang Range as a symbol of resilience and solitude. It was here that hermits retreated to seek enlightenment, where scholars wandered in search of meaning, and where travelers, awed by the land's severity, left behind verses carved into stone. Legends speak of immortals who wandered the cliffs, dragons who swam through its rivers, and phoenixes that nested in its pines. Some of the deeper caves, now accessible only by climbing iron chains and ladders, were once home to Daoist ascetics who left behind murals and carved statues hidden from the world. Among the most famous temples in the region is the Yong'an Temple, precariously perched halfway up a vertical cliff wall near Changji, Shaanxi. Its wooden structures cling to ledges no wider than a human armspan, supported by ancient wooden beams embedded into the rock. Accessing it requires a steep climb, but the reward is a panoramic view of cliffs, mist-filled valleys, and terraced farmlands that seem to rise like steps to heaven. The temple itself is silent but deeply moving, its halls lined with incense-stained statues, prayer flags dancing in the wind, and the sound of wind chimes ringing out over the abyss. Another surreal sight within the Taihang Mountains is the Red Flag Canal, an engineering marvel constructed during the 1960s by the people of Linju County. Faced with drought and famine, local farmers decided to carve a 70-kilometer-long irrigation canal directly through the mountain rock, a project that took 10 years and the labor of thousands. The canal, hanging along sheer cliffs and passing through tunnels and aqueducts, is both a symbol of human determination and an architectural wonder that seems almost alien in its scale and audacity. The seasonal transformations of the Taihang Mountains only enhance their surreal nature. In spring, wildflowers erupt from cracks in the stone, and cherry blossoms bloom in high-altitude groves. Summer brings dense green canopies and thundering streams that echo through the gorges. Autumn, however, is perhaps the most breathtaking season, when the forests blaze with fiery red maples, golden ginkgos, and orange oaks, turning the already dramatic terrain into a living painting. And in winter, the peaks and plateaus are blanketed in snow, the waterfalls freeze into crystalline curtains, and the air takes on a hushed, reverent stillness broken only by the call of birds or the crunch of boots on frost. Though less internationally renowned than China's other sacred or scenic mountains, the Taihang Range is gaining recognition for its combination of untamed wilderness, cultural weight, and spiritual energy. Infrastructure improvements have made parts of the range more accessible, but many areas remain wild and underexplored, preserving that precious quality of discovery. Hiking trails, some newly built, now allow intrepid travelers to venture deeper into the canyons, climb along iron-runged paths, and sleep in remote mountain inns that overlook valleys still lit by stars untouched by urban glow. But for those who truly understand mountains, not as backdrops, but as beings, as ancient sentinels, Taihang stands apart. It is not merely visited. It is entered. It demands respect, quiet, and endurance. And for those who answer its call, it offers something rare, a glimpse into the bones of the earth, the roar of forgotten history, and a profound reminder that the unreal is often hidden not in fantasy, but in the folds of what is real but overlooked. To stand on a ledge in the Taihang Mountains, wind curling around your body, cliffs falling away on all sides, is to feel both infinitesimal and infinite. It is to witness the world not as a surface to be crossed, but a labyrinth to be entered, carved in stone, written in time, echoing with the breath of ancestors. In the southeastern province of Fujian, where mist coils through the valleys like silk threads in a loom and emerald waters carved deep into the bones of the earth, there lies a place of such serene grandeur and layered beauty that it has long been revered not only as a site of natural wonder, but as a spiritual and cultural sanctuary. This is Mount Wui, a place that is neither a single mountain nor a linear range, but a sacred realm of river-cut canyons, jagged cliff faces, forested slopes, and ancient temples. It is one of China's most unreal landscapes, a world where the land seems alive, flowing in curves and folds like the brushstrokes of an ink painting animated by centuries of reverence and stillness. Mount Wui, or Huaishan, is not so much climbed as it is explored, glided through, and quietly absorbed. Its peaks, the most famous being Qianyu Peak, rise not in rugged majesty like those of the Himalayas, but with a subtler force, soft but immense red sandstone formations, weathered and sculpted over millions of years into isolated cliffs, domes, pillars, and walls. These landforms, technically known as Danxia formations, emerge from the green sea of subtropical forest like great stone deities, surrounded by deep gorges, dense bamboo groves, and winding rivers that reflect their forms with poetic symmetry. What sets Mount Wui apart, what truly renders it unreal, is the harmony between nature, spirituality, and culture that permeates every stream and stone. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, both for its biodiversity and its cultural significance, Huaishan is the embodiment of the classical Chinese ideal of heaven and earth in balance. The air is rich with the fragrance of tea leaves, river mist, and pine resin. Crickets chirp in bamboo thickets. Egrets and kingfishers flash like brushstrokes of white and blue over jade-green water. Time slows to the rhythm of the river, and in every rock face and every winding path, the weight of millennia presses gently upon the present. At the heart of the Wui landscape flows the Nine Bend River, a winding, crystal-clear stream that snakes between towering cliffs and forested banks. It is best experienced not on foot, but by bamboo raft, a centuries-old tradition still practiced by locals who pole visitors down the gentle current. Drifting along the Nine Bend River is like stepping into a scroll painting brought to life. Red rock walls rise abruptly on either side, their surfaces weathered with caves, grottos, and carvings. Clouds hang low and cling to the cliffs like silk veils, and the world seems distilled to the purest elements: stone, water, mist, silence. The riverbanks are etched with cliffside inscriptions and ancient grotto tombs, some dating back over 2,000 years, remnants of the region's long and illustrious human history. Among the most notable are the hanging coffins of the ancient Yu people, who placed the remains of their dead in hollowed wooden coffins lodged high in the rock faces. No one is quite sure how they accomplished such a feat, or why, but the effect is eerie and profound. Tiny black windows in red stone, silent testimonies of a people who have vanished into the folds of time. Equally unreal is the cultural heritage interwoven with the natural grandeur of Huaishan. This land was one of the great spiritual centers of Neo-Confucianism, particularly during the Song dynasty, when the influential philosopher Zhu Xi built academies and conducted scholarly discourse amid the mountain's tranquil slopes. His Wui Jingxi, a secluded study hall nestled beneath pine trees and beside flowing springs, still stands today as a symbol of intellectual and moral cultivation in perfect harmony with nature. Here, the boundaries between philosophy and environment dissolved. Nature was not merely backdrop, but teacher, mirror, and muse. In addition to its Confucian legacy, Mount Wui is also steeped in Daoist and Buddhist history. Temples such as the Qianqin Yongla Temple and the Wui Palace rest amid the forested ridges, their red walls and green-tiled roofs partially hidden by foliage. In these temples, ancient rituals continue. Incense is burned, bells toll across the valleys, and monks in ochre robes move silently through stone courtyards overgrown with moss and flowering vines. The spiritual aura of these places is not theatrical or forced. It is natural, absorbed into the rock, whispered by the river, and breathed by the trees. Then there is the matter of tea, for Huaishan is not just a scenic haven, but the ancestral home of some of the most legendary teas in China, most famously De Hong Pao, or Big Red Robe. Grown in the mineral-rich, mist-shrouded cliffs of the Wui Rock Tea terroir, this tea has been cultivated and consumed for over 1,000 years. The original De Hong Pao trees, known as mother bushes, are still alive today, clinging to the side of a narrow cliff face in a protected area rarely accessed by the public. These ancient bushes produce such rare and revered leaves that in 2002, 20 grams of De Hong Pao from them sold for over $25,000. Tea harvested from these cliffs is said to carry the flavor of the mountain itself, a complex brew that smells of orchids and stone, and tastes of minerals, smoke, and time. Visiting a Wui tea farm is its own journey into the unreal. Narrow footpaths lead through hidden groves of carefully pruned tea bushes, where tea masters, many the inheritors of generations of tradition, pluck leaves by hand and prepare them with an almost religious precision. Tasting tea here is not a casual activity. It is a ritual, often performed in small, open-air tea rooms surrounded by bamboo and waterfalls. The tiny cups release waves of scent. The first sip opens the mouth, the second warms the chest, and the third brings clarity, as though the mountain itself were whispering through the steam. The biodiversity of Mount Wui only deepens its enchantment. It is a tropical-subtropical transition zone, home to more than 5,000 species of plants and countless rare animals, including the South China tiger, in historic ranges, Chinese giant salamander, and numerous butterfly and bird species. The forests are thick with ferns, camphor trees, rhododendrons, and exotic orchids. During the rainy season, cloud forests form along the upper ridges, draping the canopy in ghostly vapor and giving the sense that one is walking through a dream of the earth itself. Qianyu Peak, the mountain's symbolic summit, is often the focus for those who choose to ascend rather than drift. The trail to its top involves a steep but rewarding climb, winding up narrow stone staircases and through thickets of bamboo. From the summit, the entire Wui Valley unfolds, a surreal vista of winding rivers, scattered cliffs, verdant islands, and distant villages shrouded in blue mist. On clear mornings, the sun rises behind the red cliffs, setting the forest aglow and causing the river to glisten like a dragon's back winding through jade. Despite its remote feel, Mount Wui has managed to balance accessibility with preservation. Much of the region is protected as part of the Huaishan National Scenic Area, and strict ecological guidelines ensure that tourism remains sustainable. No high-rise hotels mar the landscape. Villages remain traditional, built with wood and stone, their rhythms shaped by tea seasons and temple festivals rather than clocks and traffic. Even the bamboo raft operators wear linen uniforms and recite ancient poems to passengers, echoing traditions from the Song dynasty. To walk through Mount Wui is to pass not just through nature, but through layers of memory and myth, a place where every cliff and tree is inscribed with human reverence, and where the earth has not merely survived history but been sanctified by it. Whether you drift on the Nine-Bend River beneath towering cliffs, sip ancient tea beneath the shadow of a Song dynasty academy, or gaze into the clouds from a sun-drenched peak, Huaishan offers something that few places on earth can: the sense that you are inside a living painting, one that breathes, listens, and remembers. It is not an illusion. It is not fantasy. And yet, standing there, surrounded by cliffs older than empires, tea leaves wiser than books, and a silence more profound than any temple, you may find yourself asking if such a place can truly be real. And that, perhaps, is the essence of Mount Wuyi's magic. In the northern province of Hebei, not far from the political pulse of Beijing and Tianjin, there rises a quiet sentinel in the landscape, Mount Yun, or Cloud Mountain. Modest in stature compared to the iconic peaks of southern China, Mount Yun does not boast jagged cliffs or vast temple complexes etched into rock. Instead, it captivates with tranquil grace, lush forest cover, and the serene hum of mountain wind drifting through endless pine canopies. It is a mountain defined not by extremes, but by immersion into greenery, mist, and meditative stillness. For centuries, Mount Yun has drawn wanderers, hikers, and poets not for the challenge of conquest, but for the gentle revelation of its beauty. Located in Qinglong County, near the eastern edge of Hebei and within reach of the Bohai Sea, Mount Yun occupies a unique ecological zone that blends elements of the temperate northern climate with subtler coastal humidity. This allows for an incredibly rich diversity of flora, resulting in dense, layered forests that cover nearly every slope of the mountain. These forests are what define the first impression of Yunshan. It is a green mountain, a living cathedral of trees and undergrowth, carpeted in moss and ferns, wrapped in shifting mist that arrives with the dawn and lingers until midday like a soft, spectral shawl. Its name, Cloud Mountain, is not poetic license, it is description. Mornings at Yunshan often begin with clouds flowing over its ridges and nestling into its forested folds, creating an ethereal atmosphere that silences even the most talkative traveler. The summit, at just over 1,200 meters, is often invisible from below, concealed behind gauze-like mists that part suddenly to reveal soaring pines, flower-strewn meadows, and ancient stone paths. In this veil of vapor, time loses its rigidity. One moment you are climbing a narrow trail bordered by low ferns and birch, the next you're standing before a cliff-edge pavilion, clouds swirling like spirits just beyond the railing. Hiking is the soul of Mount Yun. The entire mountain is laced with well-maintained but minimally intrusive trails, often made of local stone or compacted soil, winding through forest clearings, narrow ridgelines, and steep switchbacks that test the legs but never overwhelm. The air here is particularly fresh, purified by an ecosystem dominated by pine, oak, maple, and Chinese yew, and flavored by the earthy sweetness of fallen leaves and wet rock. In spring, the forest floor bursts with wildflowers, azaleas, violets, and peonies, while in autumn, the entire canopy becomes a firework of color, with crimson maples and golden oaks glowing against a sky of burnished silver. One of the most surreal elements of Mount Yun is its silence. Despite being increasingly popular among domestic hikers and nature lovers, the mountain remains largely untouched by mass tourism. There are no roaring buses, no flashing neon signs, no karaoke drifting from convenience stalls. Instead, there is birdsong, warblers, thrushes, cuckoos, and the occasional call of a distant hawk riding a thermal beyond the ridgeline. It is common to hike for hours and encounter only a few other people, usually older locals who bow politely and pass with a quiet reverence for the trail. Along these trails lie modest but culturally significant shrines and pavilions, often built centuries ago and restored with care. These are not sprawling temples with grand staircases, but small stone sanctuaries nestled into the forest, dedicated to mountain spirits or local deities, their incense curling into the underbrush like offerings to the forest itself. Inside, one might find a small bronze statue, a wooden plaque bearing a prayer for health, or a simple red cloth tied to a pine branch by someone asking for protection or love. These sacred spaces are intimate, woven seamlessly into nature, and they exude a sense of deeply rooted spirituality that feels personal, not institutional. Perhaps the most famous of these is the Yunlu Pavilion, perched near a high ridge just below the summit. Simple in design but spectacular in setting, it offers an unobstructed view of the surrounding mountain chains, layered like waves stretching into the distance, tinted blue and green by distance and moisture. The roof of the pavilion is adorned with green glazed tiles, aged by moss and time, and wind chimes hang from its corners, ringing gently in the mountain breeze. On particularly misty days, the view from the Yunlu Pavilion is like standing at the edge of the world, watching it dissolve into light and cloud. Yunshan is also known for its seasonal waterfalls and forest springs. especially after the summer rains, when dozens of tiny rivulets tumble down its slopes, creating hidden cascades and shallow pools where travelers often rest and cool their feet. These waters are not only scenic, they are believed to be healing, rich in minerals and blessed by the spirit of the mountain. Locals come with empty jugs to collect spring water, especially from the famous Longjing Spring, tucked deep in a bamboo grove at mid-altitude, where the water emerges from between two ancient stones shaped like a dragon's jaws. Despite its gentleness, Mount Yun carries a strong undercurrent of historical memory. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, the mountain served as a natural refuge for scholars, hermits, and monks who wished to escape the corruption or chaos of court life. It was common for retired officials or disillusioned poets to retreat here, build modest wooden cottages, and spend their days transcribing sutras, painting landscapes, or simply walking the trails in silence. Some of their calligraphy, carved into stone slabs or preserved in local shrines, still remains, fragile, lichen-covered, but legible. They speak of a longing for clarity, of the pursuit of balance, of the mountain's gift of perspective. One of the lesser-known surreal aspects of Yunshan lies in its night sky. Far removed from the smog and light pollution of nearby cities, the mountain offers clear, star-filled skies, especially in the early autumn and winter months. Hikers who choose to camp near the summit, where a few designated eco-camping spots exist, are rewarded with a spectacle few expect. The Milky Way stretching overhead like a glittering river, the constellations sharp and vast above the black forest, and the soft orange glow of distant village lanterns blinking faintly in the valleys far below. In these quiet hours, when wind moves through the trees like breath through a flute, Mount Yun becomes something more than real. It becomes elemental. To climb Mount Yun is not to conquer a peak, it is to surrender to slowness, to walk into the fold between sky and forest, to listen deeply. There is no single summit moment, no grand panoramic epiphany. Instead, there are hundreds of quiet revelations: a glade of mushrooms after rain, a butterfly landing on a sleeve, the warm smoothness of sunlit granite beneath the hand, the sudden hush when a breeze stops and all the world waits. These moments accumulate like drops of morning dew until one realizes the truth. Mount Yun is not about the destination, it is about presence. It is unreal not because it defies the laws of nature, but because it embodies them so completely, so harmoniously, that it feels as though it has been waiting, not for tourists or hikers, but for those willing to see and feel the truth of stillness. In this age of noise and spectacle, Yunshan offers something precious: the chance to walk beneath a canopy of ancient trees, between clouds and stone, and find, perhaps, not a view, but a version of oneself that is whole, quiet, and real. In the misty reaches of southeastern Zhejiang province, where the clouds drift low and the land trembles with ancient memory, a landscape rises from the earth like the remains of a dream turned to stone. This is Mount Yangdang, one of China's most strikingly surreal and geologically bizarre mountain formations. A place where nature's imagination seems to have run wild, sculpting the land into impossibly steep rock towers, knife-edged ridgelines, and colossal caves carved by water and time. Long celebrated by poets, monks, painters, and emperors, Mount Yangdang is more than a mountain. It is a living theater of stone, perpetually shifting with the light, wrapped in fog, and thundered by waterfalls. The name Yangdang itself conjures poetry. It roughly translates to wild geese pond, drawn from an old legend of migrating geese that once paused in the placid lake atop one of the mountain's ridges. That lake is still there, Yangyang Lake, shimmering silently above the world. But around it, rising with astonishing verticality, is a fantasyland of volcanic cliffs, spires, and hollows, sculpted from the remnants of ancient lava flows and now standing in dramatic silence above bamboo groves and tea plantations. These formations are so unique and bizarre that Mount Yangdang was named one of China's first national geoparks, and later designated a UNESCO Global Geopark, recognized not only for its stunning beauty but also its geological rarity. What makes Mount Yangdang unreal is not just its form, it's how the entire mountain system seems like a massive, sculptural meditation on verticality. The landscape is dominated by columnar-jointed rhyolite, a rare type of volcanic rock that cooled into tall, hexagonal pillars, resembling clusters of organ pipes or petrified waterfalls. These formations erupt from the forest floor like the ribs of the earth, tall and straight, often rising over 300 meters vertically with sheer, smooth faces. Some lean like lances frozen mid-thrust, while others tower like the ruins of ancient stone temples, their tops often obscured by mist that curls between their edges like smoke from an incense burner. One of the most iconic formations is the Lingfeng Peaks, or spiritual peaks, which come alive, quite literally, under the moonlight. During the day, these towering rock pillars are impressive enough, standing like silent gods with their faces toward the sea. But it is at night, during full moons, that their real magic is revealed. The mountain's unique composition and shape cause natural silhouettes and shadows to form, giving the appearance of humans, animals, and divine beings emerging from the rock. Among the most famous of these illusions is the Sleeping Beauty silhouette, clearly visible in moonlight, a massive rock shaped like a reclining woman in repose, draped in mist and mystery. Nearby, the Lingyan Rock, a towering cliff that rises abruptly from the valley floor, is home to one of the most unforgettable sights in all of China, the Great Dragon Waterfall. This waterfall, over 200 meters high, tumbles down a vertical cliff wall with a roar that echoes through the valleys like the breath of the mountain itself. The fall seems to erupt from nowhere, a ribbon of liquid silver hurling itself into a gorge where the mist it creates is so thick, it appears as if the earth itself is breathing. The thunder of the water, the damp wind that carries its spray, and the sheer verticality of its descent create an experience that is not merely visual but visceral. But the power of Mount Yangdang does not only lie in its visual spectacle, it lies in its ability to blur the boundary between human and geological time. Scattered across the mountain's valleys and slopes are ancient Daoist and Buddhist temples, some built into the very cliffs, others perched on rocky perches reachable only by treacherous stone staircases carved into vertical walls. One such marvel is the Guanyin Temple of Lingyan, nestled halfway up a sheer cliff, its red-painted walls clinging to the rock like a swallow's nest. Here, monks still live and chant in quiet devotion, their voices rising faintly into the wind that howls along the ridge. The integration of these spiritual sites with the raw geology of Yandangshan gives the place an uncanny harmony. Paths wind not in defiance of the land, but in reverence to it. There are steps carved directly into vertical rock faces, narrow ledges protected by wooden railings polished by the touch of thousands of hands over hundreds of years. The climb is demanding, but deeply spiritual. As you ascend, the sounds of civilization fade, replaced by the rhythmic gurgle of mountain springs, the occasional thud of a falling chestnut, or the piercing cry of a hawk soaring between stone towers. Further into the park lies the Dolongqiu Scenic Area, where the cliffs seem almost too symmetrical to be natural. Enormous stone walls form narrow canyons where sunlight barely penetrates, and the air is perpetually cool and damp. Here, vines dangle from ridgelines like the cords of ancient ceremonial banners, and moss carpets the stone in deep emerald green. Stalactites and wind-sculpted holes at the cliff faces, forming alien geometries that feel like the architecture of forgotten civilizations. Mount Yangdang is also alive with biodiversity, hosting over 800 species of plants and a vibrant array of wildlife, including macaques, pheasants, and clouded leopards, though the latter are rarely seen. Birds are particularly abundant, with their songs echoing between stone walls and across wide forested valleys. In the spring, azaleas and camellias bloom in explosive color, filling the air with sweetness and drawing butterflies in mesmerizing flocks. In summer, the forests become a sanctuary of shade and cicada song, while autumn turns the entire region into a canvas of firegold, copper, and blood-red foliage that flows like paint over the stone. One particularly surreal experience is the early morning hike to Baizhong Waterfall. Setting out before dawn, hikers climb through bamboo forests and narrow passes until they reach a ledge facing the fall just as the sun rises through a gap in the cliffs. As sunlight strikes the cascade, the entire waterfall lights up, casting spectral rainbows through the mist, and filling the canyon with golden light. The scene is so powerful, so otherworldly, that it is easy to understand why monks once believed the mountain was the meeting place of immortals. Despite its wild beauty, Mount Yangdang is relatively accessible, and yet it remains underexplored compared to tourist-heavy destinations like Huangshan or Zhangjiajie. Part of its unreal quality stems from this very fact. It feels like a secret place, one foot in the present, the other in myth. There is something untouched here, something unprocessed by the expectations of modern tourism. Even its most developed areas retain an ancient, sacred ambience. The people who work and live on the mountain, the tea farmers, monks, local guides, speak of it with humility, as if acknowledging that they are merely guests in the company of gods. At night, when the day's visitors have gone and only the sound of cicadas and the breeze remains, Mount Yangdang transforms again. The cliffs become silhouettes, impossibly tall and silent. The river reflects stars. The wind flows like a voice through the narrow gorges, whispering stories written in stone long before human memory. It is then that one feels the full magnitude of the place, not just as a geographic location, but as a portal into something older, deeper, and grander than anything civilization can offer. To visit Mount Yangdang is not just to see stone and waterfall. It is to be reduced and elevated at once, to walk through a cathedral not made by man, but by the raw forces of time and earth, and to stand in or before pillars not of marble, but of molten rock frozen mid-motion, now towering with impossible grace. It is to feel both ancient and newborn in the presence of land that remembers everything. And in that moment, one cannot help but think, this place, this is not Earth as we know it. This is Earth as it once was, or perhaps, as it truly is, when it chooses to show us its secret face. In the humid subtropical heart of Guangdong province, where mist drapes valleys like forgotten silks and ancient forests still whisper old secrets, rises one of China's most sacred and spiritually charged peaks, Mount Luofu, or Luofu Shan. A sprawling, forest-cloaked massif that stands as a beacon of Taoist tradition, natural harmony, and herbal lore, Mount Luofu is not simply a mountain in the geographic sense. It is a living, breathing temple of nature, one of China's 10 famous Taoist mountains, revered for millennia as a site of enlightenment, healing, and alchemical transformation. To step into Luofu is to step out of time, into a landscape that fuses the sacred and the surreal with a tranquility both lush and profound. Mount Luofu is located in Huizhou, a city about 150 kilometers from Guangzhou, and yet it feels worlds away from the pulsing urban rhythms of modern China. The mountain covers over 250 square kilometers, with more than 400 peaks, countless caves, dozens of waterfalls, and more than 80 Taoist monasteries and temples, many still active and home to monks and nuns who carry on ancient rituals. The highest peak, Feiyun Peak, rises to 1,290 meters, but elevation alone does not capture its gravity. Luofu is not defined by altitude but by atmosphere. Dense, primordial forests, rivers of vapor, hidden grottos, and celestial silence. The landscape of Luofu Shan is a masterpiece of Taoist geomancy. It's said to align perfectly with the principles of feng shui, with its ridges and valleys forming the ideal flow of qi, or life energy. Early Taoist masters believed that the mountain was chosen by the heavens to be a sanctuary for divine practice, a place where heaven and earth meet. It became, over time, not only a site of pilgrimage but a laboratory of immortality, where sages sought to refine elixirs, cultivate internal alchemy, and transcend the limitations of the mortal body. Chief among these figures was the legendary Ji Hong, a 4th century Taoist scholar, physician, and alchemist who lived, practiced, and taught on Luofu. His legacy is deeply etched into the mountain's stones and culture. Ji Hong is said to have authored portions of the Baopuzi, a foundational Taoist text, while living in a secluded cave on the mountain. He experimented with mineral and herbal elixirs, compiled exhaustive medical texts, and searched for spiritual immortality in the harmony of the landscape. The cave where he lived, now called Ji's Yandong, remains a sacred site, tucked deep into a wooded cliff, with incense perpetually curling at its mouth and a trickling spring said to hold healing powers. The temples of Luofu Shan are not grand and opulent in the way that imperial Buddhist temples often are. Instead, they exude a weathered humility, blending almost imperceptibly into their surroundings, often built of stone and wood in such harmony with the terrain that they appear to have grown from the mountain itself. The Temple of the Supreme Clarity, Shangqing Gong, is one of the oldest and most revered, perched on a wooded slope surrounded by moss-covered trees. Here, Taoist priests in flowing robes chant softly before altars dedicated to the Three Pure Ones, while wind chimes echo with the rhythm of rustling leaves. The ambience is one of intimate reverence, not spectacle, a sense that the divine lives not above, but within. Perhaps one of the most surreal qualities of Luofu Shan is the way water animates the mountain. Numerous streams, waterfalls, and sacred springs cascade through its forests, each with its own legend, spirit, or healing power. The Beishumen waterfall, hidden deep in the forest, plunges from a cliffside into a pool of crystalline green. Locals believe the waters are blessed by the mountain gods, and pilgrims often bathe in its lower reaches or collect the water in small gourds for rituals. During the rainy season, the entire mountain resounds with the sound of flowing water, a constant background hymn to the mountain's living energy. The flora of Luofu is astonishingly rich. The mountain is often referred to as a natural pharmacy, housing over 3,000 species of medicinal plants, many of which were catalogued by Ji Hong and used in traditional Chinese medicine. Gnarled cinnamon trees, camphor, ginseng, astragalus, honeysuckle, and lingzhi mushrooms grow in shaded groves or cling to cliffsides, their properties passed down through centuries of herbalists and healers. Even today, Taoist monks harvest plants by hand using ancient techniques, and small apothecaries in nearby villages prepare infusions and powders that carry Luofu's healing tradition forward. Walking the trails of Luofu is a multi-sensory pilgrimage. Narrow stone paths wind through dense thickets of bamboo, under canopies of ancient oaks and maples, past moss-covered boulders etched with Taoist sutras. The mountain exhales slowly. The air is heavy with moisture and the scent of pine and loam. Birds call intermittently, and insects drone in meditative rhythms. Along the way are red prayer ribbons tied to trees, incense-stained stone lanterns, and shrines built inside natural caves, where candles flicker in the darkness beside statues worn smooth by centuries of touch. Each step feels like a passage not only deeper into nature, but deeper into stillness, as though the mountain is gradually dissolving your thoughts. One of the most surreal and spiritually charged places on Luofu is the crane flight platform, Hefeitai, a flat stone outcrop high on the mountain that legends say was once the takeoff point for immortals ascending to heaven on the backs of white cranes. The view from this platform is astonishing, layer upon layer of forested ridges stretching to the horizon, mist coiling like ribbons between peaks, the rising sun painting the clouds in. Walking through the town below, one finds entire markets devoted to this stone, polished slabs with natural patterns resembling mountains, rivers, and even human figures, revered not only for their aesthetic beauty but for the belief that they carry the energy of the sacred mountain. Perhaps one of the most dreamlike aspects of Mount Tsangshan is the presence of snow, which falls on the upper slopes during winter and lingers on the peaks well into spring. In southern China, snow is rare enough to be magical, and to see the white crown of Tsangshan rising above green forests and subtropical blooms is to witness an ecological paradox that defies expectation. In winter, the contrast is even more surreal. Snow-covered pines, icy streams, and monks wrapped in saffron robes tending to fires in mountain huts built of stone and wood. For those who venture further than the typical paths, Tsangshan reveals deeper, stranger wonders. The Butterfly Spring, near the northern foot of the range, is said to be a place of romance and transformation. In springtime, thousands of butterflies gather here, swirling in colorful clouds above the crystal waters, creating a vision that feels lifted straight from a legend. Lovers come here to make wishes, tying red ribbons to the branches in hopes of sealing eternal bonds. Even at night, Mount Tsangshan doesn't sleep. Under a sky heavy with stars, its peaks stand silent and luminous, reflecting moonlight like giant silver sentinels. The forests rustle softly in the darkness. Dallas lights twinkle faintly in the distance, and the lake glows with the afterimage of the sky. Those who choose to camp along the higher ridges often speak of dreams that feel like visions, of a sense of communion with something vast and nameless. In the ever-changing light, sunrise burning gold on the peaks, noontime mist curling through firs, evening casting violet shadows over the slopes, Tsangshan is a canvas in constant motion. Its stillness is never static. Its peace is alive. And while its forms are carved in stone and snow, its spirit feels as fluid and ungraspable as the clouds that touch its highest ridges. Mount Tsangshan does not ask to be conquered or even fully understood. It invites those who arrive to slow down, to walk with awareness, and to listen, to wind, water, and silence. It rewards not the hurried traveler, but the one who is willing to return again and again, finding each time a different face, a new mood, a deeper stillness. And in the end, when one stands on a ridge watching the sun vanish behind the white peaks, with Dali glowing below like a city of lanterns, the unreality of it all becomes not a question of whether this place could exist, but how we have gone so long without remembering that such places always have. Deep in the heart of Hubei province, far from China's hypermodern skylines and industrial roar, a forested realm of mystery and wonder lies cradled among steep mountains and shifting clouds. This is Mount Shenongjia, a vast and surreal highland area that feels more like a living myth than a destination on any ordinary map. Revered for its astonishing biodiversity, shrouded in legends, and home to one of the world's most mysterious ecosystems, Mount Shenongjia occupies a singular space in China's natural and cultural imagination. a sanctuary of primeval forest where folklore breathes and evolution still dances its slow, wild ballet. Covering an area of over 3,000 square kilometers, Shenongjia is not defined by one singular peak but by a network of mountains and valleys, the highest of which is Shunnong Peak, rising to 3,105 meters above sea level. These mountains form the easternmost edge of the Great Darba Range and have been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site for both their natural significance and their connection to Chinese myth. The region is veiled in dense, ancient forests, many of which have never been logged or significantly disturbed by human activity. The result is a truly primeval wilderness, thick with mist and mystery, where time feels like a distant memory. At the heart of this mythic landscape is the figure from whom the region takes its name, Shunnong, the divine farmer of Chinese legend. Said to have lived thousands of years ago, Shunnong was one of the legendary emperors who taught early humanity how to cultivate crops, boil water, and use medicinal herbs. According to lore, he roamed these mountains in search of healing plants, personally tasting hundreds of herbs, some of which poisoned him, some of which healed, and some of which he recorded for the benefit of future generations. He is often depicted as a wild man of the forest with a transparent belly, so that he could see how the herbs affected his organs. It is believed he ultimately died here, having consumed a toxic herb, and that his body became one with the mountain itself. This myth still resonates today, especially because Mount Shenongjia is a biological treasure chest. Often described as a natural gene bank, the region harbors over 3,700 species of vascular plants, including ancient and rare flora such as dawn redwoods, kotsura trees, and the Chinese yew, some of which date back to the age of the dinosaurs. The forest canopy here is tiered and rich, supporting a complex ecosystem that spans subtropical broadleaf forests, temperate coniferous zones, and alpine meadows, all layered one upon another as elevation climbs. But perhaps even more surreal is the faunal diversity. Shenongjia is one of the last strongholds of the elusive and endangered golden snub-nosed monkey, a creature that looks like it stepped straight out of a fantasy story, with bright orange fur, blue faces, and soulful, ancient eyes. These primates live in tight social groups in the upper canopy and are incredibly rare to see, though their calls echo through the forest like songs from some unseen realm. The mountain is also home to Asiatic black bears, Chinese giant salamanders, clouded leopards, tarkeen, and hundreds of species of birds, many of which are endemic to the region. There are creatures here that exist nowhere else on Earth, and more than a few that science suspects may still be hiding. This is the only region in China where credible stories of a wild man, the Yeren, China's Bigfoot-like cryptid, persist with stubborn frequency and detail. For centuries, and even up to recent decades, villagers, hunters, and researchers have reported sightings of a large, hairy, upright walking humanoid creature living deep within the forest. Expeditions have been mounted, footprints have been cast, and strange calls recorded, but no definitive proof has been found. The possibility lingers, aided by the impenetrable nature of the terrain and the sheer scale of untamed wilderness. In a world where every corner is mapped and monitored, Shenongjia remains one of the few places where the unknown still breathes. The landscape here is no less otherworldly than its stories. Narrow ridgelines snake across the skyline like the backs of sleeping dragons. Deep valleys filled with cloud forests and sudden waterfalls give the illusion of lost worlds unfolding beyond each bend. Mist moves like a living thing, one moment exposing a cliff of moss, covered stone, the next swallowing it whole. In spring, wildflowers explode across the meadows, orchids, azaleas, primroses, and lilies, drawing butterflies in hypnotic numbers. In autumn, the entire region glows with fiery reds and golds, a surreal and fleeting spectacle reflected in clear mountain streams. Scattered throughout the range are hidden villages, some of which are home to the Tujia and Han ethnic minorities, who have lived in harmony with the forest for generations. Their traditions, herbal medicine, shamanic practices, ancestral worship, are deeply tied to the land, and many still believe the forest is alive with spirits and ancestors, requiring respect, offerings, and occasional solitude. These cultural practices blend seamlessly with the wilderness, enhancing the sense that one walks through a landscape not just of natural beauty but of spiritual resonance. Hiking in Mount Shenongjia is both reward and revelation. The trails range from easy valley walks to treacherous climbs along sheer cliff faces and through dripping, moss-choked gorges. The most famous route ascends to Sheningding, the highest peak, where panoramic views unfold over an ocean of green ridges fading into the misty distance. Here, the air grows thin and sharp, and the wind carries the scent of highland pines and distant thunderstorms. In the distance, birds ride thermals like silent gliders, and the sky seems impossibly close. But just as profound are the lower trails, those that snake through the Hongping Nature Reserve or the Xinhua Orchid Valley, where giant trees arch overhead like cathedral spires, and ferns as tall as men line the trail. The sound of running water is constant. It is not uncommon to see herbalists harvesting plants, or villagers leaving small red ribbons tied to tree branches, symbolic offerings to mountain spirits for health, luck, or safe passage. At night, Mount Shenongjia becomes even more unreal. The stars, freed from the haze of human settlement, come down in rivers, mirrored by the still surfaces of forest ponds. Fireflies light up the underbrush in flickering constellations. The cry of a distant owl echoes between valleys. The darkness is deep, but never dead. It breathes, it listens, it remembers. For those who spend the night in the mountain's interior, whether in a ranger's cabin or a rustic eco-lodge, dreams often take on a vivid clarity, as though the mountain whispers while you sleep. What sets Mount Shenongjia apart from other sacred mountains of China is not just its biodiversity or its mythical associations, it is its untouched wildness. While other sacred sites have been sculpted by pilgrims, transformed by temples and steps, Shenongjia remains raw, untamed, mysterious. It is a mountain not for conquest but for contemplation. A place that still hides things, perhaps even beings, not yet ready to be seen. To walk through Mount Shenongjia is to move through layers of time, prehistoric, mythic, and present, all overlapping, all speaking in the language of rustling leaves, distant thunder, and the hush of snowfall on moss. It is a place that humbles, that awakens awe, that invites silence not as emptiness, but as a sacred presence. In every fern, every shadowed path, every cry echoing from the trees, one feels the presence of something older than humanity. Something watching. Something waiting. And for all its wildness, Shenongjia does not push you away. It absorbs you. One step at a time, it draws you deeper, until you are no longer just walking through the mountain, but within it. Part of it. On the vast windswept plains of the Tibetan Plateau, where the sky stretches farther than the imagination and the silence is broken only by the hiss of glacial wind, there rises a titan. A mountain that is not merely the highest on earth, but a monolith of myth, science, and spiritual gravity. Known to the world as Mount Everest, but known in Tibet as Mount Komalangma, goddess mother of the world, this towering, snow-sculpted peak stands as the planet's most iconic summit, piercing the heavens at a staggering 8,848.86 meters. Yet it is not its altitude alone that renders it unreal, it is its atmosphere, its stillness, its terrifying scale and almost divine indifference, especially when viewed from the north, the Chinese side, where Komalangma reveals a face far more solemn, haunting, and monumental than what most climbers ever see. Unlike the southern approach from Nepal, which is dominated by verdant valleys, bustling base camps, and the popularity of commercial expeditions, the northern face of Komalangma, viewed from Tibet's Rongbuk region, is stark, solemn, and visually overwhelming. The landscape here is composed of bone-colored plains, frozen rivers, and jagged rock, with the pyramid of Everest rising in terrifying clarity above the barren land like an impossibly massive altar. There are no crowds, no tea houses, no lush approach trails. Instead, there is emptiness, filled only by wind and light. This is the face of the mountain as it was seen by the first explorers, the one that greeted George Mallory and Andrew Irvine when they vanished into legend in 1924. To reach this side of Everest is to pass through vast corridors of time and silence. The journey begins in Shigatse, Tibet's second-largest city, and moves west through mountain passes at over 5,000 meters, where prayer flags flutter in high-altitude gales and the land looks more like the surface of another planet than Earth. The final stretch to the North Base Camp winds through stark valleys hemmed in by towering ridges, eventually opening to a sudden, almost surreal vista. The north wall of Everest, so massive and vertical it appears carved not by nature, but by some divine architect. The mountain is so tall, so sheer, so geometrically exact, it unsettles the senses. It dwarfs everything: humans, thoughts, sounds. This is a place where light behaves differently. Sunrises ignite the summit with burning orange, while the lower slopes remain shadowed and blue. Afternoons shimmer with reflected ice light, casting razor-sharp shadows across the valley floor. And at night, under Tibet's infamous lack of light pollution, the Milky Way bends visibly over the north face, giving the surreal impression that the mountain is a needle pinning the sky to the earth. The Rongbuk Monastery, just a few kilometers from the base camp, is the highest monastery on earth and has stood for over a century as a place of quiet spiritual watching. Here, at an altitude of 5,000 meters, monks have lived in harmony with the mountain, regarding it not as an object to be conquered, but as a deity to be revered. The wind carries the hum of chants through the rocks, and the thin air makes every breath feel like a prayer. From the windows of this stark, beautiful sanctuary, one can sit in perfect stillness and watch clouds move slowly across Everest's jagged flanks like silken banners trailing from the shoulders of gods. The glacier fields leading up to the base of the north face are alien and endless: serrated ice ridges, bottomless crevasses, and fields of boulders etched by millennia of freeze-thaw cycles. These glaciers, the Rongbuk and East Rongbuk Glacier, are both hauntingly beautiful and critically endangered. As climate change accelerates, these ancient rivers of ice are retreating, revealing fossilized forests, mummified animals, and the remnants of expeditions long past. The mountain, silent and unmoved, stands witness to these transformations, offering no comment, only presence. Climbing from the Chinese side is widely regarded as more difficult and remote, both physically and spiritually. There are no forested trails or wide villages to ease the approach. Instead, climbers must navigate icy moraines, blasted ridgelines, and deadly winds, often in solitude. The North Col, a key high camp at 7,000 meters, is reached by ascending vertical ice walls and exposed sections of glacier. From there, the North Ridge route snakes upward in a terrifying traverse to the summit. This route is less commercialized and more dangerous than the South Col route in Nepal, and its difficulty has preserved much of the mountain's aura of inaccessibility. From the north face, Everest's triangular peak appears almost too symmetrical to be natural, its ridges forming perfect lines down into the void. Avalanches thunder down its flanks like white dragons. Winds whip ice crystals into spinning vortexes that rise into the blue. The summit, when visible, glows like a beacon, but it is a beacon of silence, not invitation. From this side, the mountain does not call. It watches. It waits. Yet even without climbing, the feeling of being in Komalangma's presence, merely standing at base camp, watching the changing light, listening to the silence, is profoundly unreal. The air is razor thin, and even simple movements become laborious. The scale warps perception. Nearby peaks that would be enormous elsewhere are dwarfed by Everest's absurd mass. Pilgrims from across Tibet come here to circumambulate, spinning prayer wheels and chanting mantras in the thin air. Their faith is palpable, their pace unhurried, their faces sun-worn and peaceful. From the spiritual perspective, Komalangma is not just the goddess mother. She is a guardian, a cosmic axis, a bridge between the human and the celestial. In Tibetan Buddhism, she is considered the residence of a powerful deity, and approaching her is an act of reverence, not ambition. This ethos stands in stark contrast to the more commercial narratives often associated with the mountain from the south. On the northern side, there is no illusion of mastery, only acceptance of one's own insignificance before the eternal. And it is precisely this sense of awe, of being in the presence of something vast, inscrutable, and unyielding, that gives Mount Komalangma its unreal essence. No photo can capture the way the light moves across its ridges, how the wind sounds as it echoes off her flanks, how the sheer presence of that much rock and ice changes the way you breathe, think, feel. Here, in the thin air above the world, the mountain becomes a mirror, not just of the Earth's extreme power, but of your own internal landscape. Because to see Everest from the north is to see not only the world's highest point, but to see the human soul reflected at scale, small, searching, and deeply silent. In the remote, rain-drenched wilds of southeastern Tibet, where the Himalayas twist in silence and the mighty Yarlung Zangpo River carves the world's deepest canyon, rises a mountain of staggering mystery, majesty, and myth, Mount Namcha Bawa. Revered by Tibetans as the spear that pierces the sky, Namche Bawa is not simply one of the most awe-inspiring mountains on Earth, it is one of the least known, a spectral presence hidden in cloud, cloaked in snow, and haunted by legend. Often referred to as the Eternal Virgin Mountain due to its untouched summit, Namche Bawa is the eastern anchor of the Himalayas, a solitary and impossible spire rising 7,782 meters, 25,531 feet, above sea level. So remote, so rarely seen in full clarity, that for decades it seemed almost unreal. Namche Bawa is not just a mountain, it is a revelation, veiled behind curtains of mist, hidden in one of the most geologically active and topographically extreme places on the planet. It towers at the eastern bend of the Yarlung Zangpo Grand Canyon, a region where the river, Tibet's mother river and the highest major river in the world, makes an impossible U-turn around the base of the peak, plunging into a gorge so deep and vast it makes the Grand Canyon look like a wrinkle in the earth. This is a place of profound and almost aggressive verticality, where the difference between river and summit is over 7,000 meters, the largest such relief on Earth. Approaching Namche Bawa is an odyssey in itself. There are no tourist trails, no souvenir shops, no well-trodden pilgrim circuits. From the Tibetan town of Ningchi, one must journey through valleys of dense jungle, past landslides and suspension bridges, into the deepest heart of the Zangpo Gorge, where rainfall can exceed 4,000 millimeters a year, and the air is thick with the scent of orchids, ferns, and moss. This is not the Tibet of dry plateaus and wind-swept temples. This is a hidden Tibet, one of tropical humidity and jungle-like biodiversity, closer in climate to Southeast Asia than to the frigid Himalayan spine just kilometers to the west. And then, when the clouds part, a rare event, often only for a few minutes at dawn or after a storm, Namche Bawa is revealed, a shimmering fang of ice and stone, soaring impossibly high, its peak knife-like and wrapped in its own weather. The mountain is almost pyramidal, with sheer ridges radiating like arms, and glacier spilling from its shoulders into unseen valleys below. The surreal scale of it is hard to grasp, even in person. Everything around it, already massive, is dwarfed. Trees give way to cliffs, cliffs to ice, ice to sky. The transition feels unreal, like watching a forgotten god emerge from the clouds. Because of its remoteness and extreme terrain, Namche Bawa remained unclimbed until 1992, making it the highest unclimbed mountain in the world for a significant portion of the 20th century. Its first successful ascent was achieved by a Chinese-Japanese expedition, a feat that required months of effort and left the mountaineering world stunned. Even today, no subsequent ascents have been recorded, and the mountain retains an aura of sacred untouchability, a reputation not just of difficulty, but of reluctance to be known. Local lore even tells of expeditions mysteriously repelled, of climbers falling ill, and of spiritual forces guarding the summit. It is said by some Tibetans that Namche Bawa is a living spirit, one not to be conquered but to be respected from afar. This spiritual dimension is intrinsic to the mountain's identity. Namche Bawa is considered a holy mountain in Tibetan Buddhism, a manifestation of a wrathful deity, and its surrounding region, known as Pemako, is viewed as one of the most sacred and secret regions of Tibetan cosmology. Pemako means lotus array and is believed to be a hidden paradise, one of the fabled Bales, mythical sanctuaries where the faithful may retreat during times of world decline. These hidden lands are said to be protected by supernatural guardians, accessible only to those of pure heart and unwavering devotion. According to ancient prophecies, when the world descends into chaos, the worthy will find refuge here, beyond the cliffs, within valleys untouched by time. This belief has spurred generations of secret pilgrims, monks, and seekers to attempt treks into the deep Pemako wilderness, searching for spiritual enlightenment in the shadow of Namche Bawa. Some disappear. Others return changed, speaking of luminous visions, encounters with celestial beings, or of days spent in caves where time flowed differently. The terrain they must cross is no less miraculous. Sacred lakes, sky-blue waterfalls, hidden plateaus, and vertical forests of rhododendron and juniper, dripping with rain and mystery. Even scientists regard the area as biologically unique. The forests surrounding Namche Bawa are home to species found nowhere else: red pandas, clouded leopards, Bengal tigers, and birds whose songs echo through the trees like forgotten hymns. Incredibly, the sharp gradient between subtropical river valley and alpine peak allows an entire planet's worth of biodiversity to exist within a relatively small area. One could walk from a forest filled with banana plants to a glacial moraine in a single day, a surreal compression of ecosystems found nowhere else. Yet for all its magnificence, Namche Bawa is not a place that wants to be found. The weather here is ferocious. Storms build suddenly, tearing across the ridges with savage winds. Landslides cut off paths, and fog descends like a curtain of blindness. Helicopters often cannot reach the area, and communication is limited to the most rudimentary radio setups. Most of the land surrounding the mountain is protected, inaccessible without special permits. And even then, the true approach to the mountain's base is more mythic than mapped. But perhaps this is exactly why Namche Bawa remains so profoundly unreal. It is a mountain that resists the age of accessibility, that defies our human tendency to dominate and document. It is a spiritual citadel, a natural cathedral, a place that humbles every notion of control or understanding. To stand anywhere near Namche Bawa is to feel the full weight of the earth's majesty pressing inward, to feel oneself very small, very fragile, and very alive. There are few places left on earth that offer this kind of raw, unfiltered connection to the ancient forces that shaped our world. Fewer still that retain their mystery in an age of satellites and search engines. Namche Bawa, cloaked in snow and legend, is one such place, a sentinel watching silently at the edge of heaven, a mountain not to be conquered, but witnessed, feared, and revered. And when the mists close again, swallowing the peak back into the unknown, one feels not cheated, but blessed, for having glimpsed, if only for a moment, something beyond the boundary of comprehension. On the western frontier of Sichuan province, where the Great Tibetan Plateau begins to rumble against the Sichuan Basin in a slow-motion tectonic collision, stands a mountain wrapped in legend, shadow, and danger, Mount Gongar. Known in Chinese as the King of Sichuan, it is the highest peak in the Hengduan Mountains and the easternmost 7,000-meter peak on Earth, rising to a chilling 7,556 meters, 24,790 feet. But while its towering form is known and admired from many angles, it is the west face of Mount Gongar that remains the most haunting, the least photographed, and the most surreal. A stark cathedral of ice and granite that few humans have ever truly seen, and even fewer have survived approaching. This western face, remote, jagged, and often cloud-covered, is the hidden soul of Gongar, a realm that exists almost like a phantom, known more through whispered mountaineering lore than imagery. Unlike the comparatively accessible eastern side of the mountain, where trekkers can glimpse the snow-clad summit from viewing platforms or distant ridgelines, the western side is buried deep within a maze of glacial valleys, knife-edged ridges, and rock walls that rise like the sides of a blade cleaving the heavens. To venture here is to step into one of the last unexplored corridors of the Greater Himalayas, a land where maps are vague, rescue is impossible, and nature retains absolute dominion. The approach to the west face of Gongar begins far from the relative comfort of Kangding or Hailuogu, the better-known eastern access points. One must instead navigate through raw, undeveloped wilderness, passing through little-visited Tibetan villages, high-altitude passes, and glacier-fed rivers that twist through canyons unmarked by any path. The region is known for sudden landslides, unstable weather, and lack of any clear human infrastructure. No lodges, no marked trails, and often not even a clear direction. Even GPS systems often fail, with signal lost to the deep walls of the valleys or absorbed by the thick cloud cover that guards the mountain like a curse. And then, after days or even weeks of uncertain progress, the traveler might round a bend, crest a ridge, or clear a fog bank, and find themselves standing before the west face, a towering monolith of black stone and brilliant ice, steeper and more vertical than nearly any other face in East Asia, rising more than 3,000 meters nearly straight up from the valley floor. Gongar's west face is not just a mountain wall, it is a vertical universe, an ever-frozen cascade of seracs, overhanging cliffs, cornices, and snowfields, streaked with shadows like scars from battles with the sky itself. Here, the mountain looks nothing like the serene snow dome so often depicted on postcards from the eastern side. It appears hostile, raw, and sentient, a sleeping titan turned on its side, dreaming of avalanches and sky fire. The glacier here roar at night, cracking and shifting like tectonic ghosts. Icefalls break without warning. Rockfall is constant. Winds scream down the face in long, mournful howls. It is a place utterly uninhabitable, utterly untamable, and because of this, utterly captivating. The mystique of the west face is magnified by the fact that photographic evidence is almost non-existent. The few images that do exist are grainy, taken from reconnaissance helicopters or rare exploratory expeditions. There are no observation decks, no safe vantages. Even in the mountaineering community, Gyeongga's west face is spoken of with reverence and caution. Climbing it is considered one of the most dangerous objectives in Asia. The face is steep, the snow is unstable, the weather is feral. Several teams have attempted it. Many never returned. One particularly haunting chapter in Gyeongga's history is that of American climber Gil Roberts, who in 2003 was part of a team attempting an exploratory approach from the west. Caught in a white oak blizzard while navigating near the lower icefall, they endured days without sun, with food dwindling and snow accumulating in lethal silence. Though the team survived, they later described the mountain as alive and watching. The term echoed throughout the climbing world, not in superstition, but in reverence. The west face does not welcome visitors. It tolerates intrusions briefly. It punishes hubris. And yet, even amid this terror and unpredictability, the west face possesses a kind of transcendental beauty. The sharp angles of its ridge lines slice the sky with impossible precision. At dawn, the rock gleams violet and indigo beneath a mantle of wind-blown snow, while the ice cliffs blush pink in the first rays of sunlight, a sight only a handful of humans have ever witnessed firsthand. In rare moments when storms clear and the sky turns steel blue, the entire face lights up with reflected brilliance, its verticality made almost abstract by the sheer dimensions of space and shadow. This region is also spiritually charged. In Tibetan culture, Gyeongga is a sacred mountain, known as Minya Konka, the residence of a powerful mountain deity. The mountain is not something to be conquered, but circumambulated, prayed to, revered. Locals perform kora, ritual circuits, around the base of the peak, often taking weeks to complete, battling altitude sickness, cold, and rugged terrain, not for glory, but for purification of karma. Even the name Gyeongga evokes a kind of distant power. It translates loosely to the highest snow mountain, and among Tibetans, it holds a spiritual status second only to Kailash. For these pilgrims and monks, the unseen side of the mountain, the west face, is believed to be the realm of spirits and protectors, a place few are meant to witness, and even fewer to survive. Stories persist of travelers who turned back after seeing visions in the ice, glowing shapes, whispered voices, patterns in the snow that moved like script being written by invisible hands. Whether these are hallucinations born of hypoxia or glimpses of something deeper, none can say. But the mysticism of the west face is as real as the altitude sickness, and just as unforgiving. The ecosystem here, though sparse, is surprisingly rich in its lower zones. Alpine meadows filled with edelweiss, blue poppies, and rhododendrons burst into color during the brief summer melt, before being buried again beneath snows that return by mid-autumn. Herds of blue sheep traverse cliff ledges with ghostly silence. Snow leopards prowl the shadowed ridges, rarely seen but leaving behind paw prints in the fresh snow. Eagles ride the wind currents like spirits watching from above, scanning the valleys for movement. There are no settlements near the base of the west face. No roads. No marked trails. It remains one of the few places in modern China where the natural world still reigns uncontested, where a traveler must answer not to schedules or digital maps, but to weather, mountain spirits, and instinct. In this way, the west face of Mount Gyeongga is not merely a destination. It is a question, asked of those few who dare to approach it. Are you ready to meet the raw truth of Earth? The kind that doesn't explain itself? To witness Gyeongga from the west is to stand on the edge of something pre-human, prehistory, and utterly sacred. You leave with no souvenir, no summit photo, no social media post. Only the echo of wind in your ears, and the vision of a mountain that will outlast memory itself. Far in the remote reaches of northwestern Yunnan province, where the cloud-piercing ridges of the Hengduan Mountains unfurl in deep folds and the wind speaks in the language of pine needles and glacier-fed rivers, rises a mountain of sublime stillness and reverence, Mount Baimang, also known as Baima Snow Mountain. Shrouded in clouds and mystery, this towering massif, reaching over 5,429 meters, 17,815 feet, at its highest point, is both a biological sanctuary and a sacred sentinel, a place of deep cultural significance, home to endangered species, ancient forests, and an atmosphere so pure and ethereal it feels untethered from the modern world. Though less internationally known than some of its Himalayan counterparts, Mount Baimang is arguably one of the most pristine and unreal places in all of China, a confluence of ecological wonder, spiritual belief, and untouched natural grandeur. It stands near the junction of Yunnan and the Tibet Autonomous Region, forming part of the broader Three Parallel Rivers region, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This region, famed for its unparalleled verticality and biodiversity, sees the mighty Yangtze, Jinsho, Mekong, Lancang, and Salween, Nujiang, rivers flow in parallel, divided by towering ridges, and Baimang looms like a silent guardian above them. What makes Baimang particularly extraordinary is its profound ecological richness. The mountain straddles both the tropical and temperate zones, allowing for an almost surreal compression of climates and habitats. From river gorges filled with lush bamboo and orchid forests to subalpine meadows, rhododendron-covered slopes, and finally, to glacier-swept peaks, the gradient of life zones here is breathtaking. Walking its trails is like flipping through millions of years of evolution in a single day. This diversity supports an astonishing array of rare and endangered species, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. Among the most famed residents is the elusive Yunnan snub-nosed monkey, or black snub-nosed monkey, Rhinopithecus beeti, a hauntingly beautiful primate with porcelain-white fur, deep-set eyes, and an upturned nose that gives it a perpetually wistful expression. These creatures live in the upper reaches of the mountain's fir and spruce forests, surviving in some of the harshest conditions endured by any non-human primate. Highly social, these monkeys move in coordinated groups, their presence a rare and sacred sight, even for locals. Other endemic or threatened species in the region include the red panda, the snow leopard, the blood pheasant, and the mysterious Chinese forest musk deer, whose scent glands were once prized in ancient perfumery and medicine. The slopes of Mount Baimang also host over 2,000 species of plants, including ancient rhododendron groves that explode into bloom during springtime, blanketing the highlands in a surreal tapestry of color and fragrance. Blue poppies, edelweiss, and rare alpine herbs grow here, feeding both local medicinal traditions and legends of immortality. But Baima Snow Mountain is not just a realm of flora and fauna, it is also a mountain of deep spiritual resonance. For the local Tibetan communities, particularly those of the Kham Tibetan cultural region, Baimang is sacred. They believe the mountain is inhabited by powerful protective deities, and its peaks are not to be climbed but circled in reverence. This spiritual practice, known as Kora, sees pilgrims, some of whom walk for days to reach the mountain, circumambulate its flanks, spinning prayer wheels, murmuring mantras, and seeking blessings for health, rebirth, and inner purification. During religious festivals, the area becomes a moving tapestry of color and devotion. Prayer flags flutter across high passes, sending blessings into the wind. Stone cairns are stacked in ritual formations, and the sound of long Tibetan horns echoes across the valleys like a conversation with the gods. Some pilgrims make prostrating journeys, falling to their knees and pressing their foreheads to the earth every few steps, slowly winding their way along treacherous trails. They do not come to conquer the mountain but to commune with it, to offer humility before something eternal. The air around Baimang is extraordinarily crisp and thin, often fragrant with juniper smoke from distant villages. As one ascends, human presence dwindles to almost nothing. The forests give way to meadows, then boulder fields, then stark ridgelines where only lichens and cold wind survive. In the early morning, clouds pool in the valleys like white lakes, while the summit glows in soft gold as the sun brushes its icy crown. During winter, heavy snow drapes the landscape in silence, and the peak appears to float above the earth, isolated and impossibly pure. From certain vantages, especially in the northern valleys near Daqing County, the mountain dominates the horizon with such presence that it seems more like a dream than a geological formation. Its slopes shimmer in the high-altitude light, interrupted only by flocks of birds soaring upward or the distant trace of a snow leopard crossing a ridge. Photographers and poets alike have compared Baimang to a forgotten deity, sleeping in the clouds, vast beyond articulation. Unlike many other Chinese peaks that have been fully integrated into national tourism infrastructures, Baimang remains largely untouched, especially its interior. Only a few basic lodges and trekking paths exist on the periphery. Much of the mountain is protected, part of the Baima Snow Mountain National Nature Reserve, and access to certain higher areas is strictly limited to preserve the fragile environment. Even seasoned mountaineers often shy away from attempting any ascents, not only out of respect for local traditions but due to the technical difficulty, weather unpredictability, and the genuine danger posed by unstable snowfields and avalanches. The stories surrounding the mountain only deepen its aura. Locals speak of ancient shamans who could call storms from its peaks. There are tales of strange lights seen moving along the upper ridges, sky travelers, some say, or guardian spirits performing their rounds. Some claim there are hidden lakes near the summit that reflect not your face, but your true self. Others say dreams are more vivid here, and that time bends differently the closer you come to the sacred heart of Baimang. Indeed, one does not visit Mount Baimang in search of conquest or even simple scenery. One comes to be still, to listen, to feel. The experience is not loud or triumphant. It is quiet, crystalline, and slow. Here, surrounded by a silence broken only by wind and wings, one comes face to face with an aspect of nature that has not been commodified or explained. Something vast, mysterious, and humbling. At dusk, the valleys below Baimang glow with low amber light, and smoke curls from distant hearths in villages clinging to the cliffs. Children's laughter mingles with the sound of temple bells. And overhead, the mountain, now cloaked in indigo shadow, waits in silence, a watchful guardian, a spirit of snow, a dream older than history. High above the central spine of Taiwan, where mountain ridges slice the sky and valleys fall away into shadowy depths, lies a mystical place of shifting light, biting wind, and celestial spectacle. Mount Hehuan, known also as the Mountain of Joy. With its highest peak rising to 3,416 meters, 11,207 feet, Mount Hehuan is one of the few places in subtropical Taiwan where snow regularly falls, creating an alpine dreamscape in winter and a stargazer's paradise on cold, clear nights. It is not the tallest mountain on the island, but in terms of accessibility, ethereal beauty, and surreal contrast to the lush lowlands below, it may be the most otherworldly. Set within the Taroko National Park, Hehuanshan is a range composed of several sub-peaks: Main Peak, East Peak, North Peak, West Peak, and Shemen Mountain, each offering unique perspectives of the dramatic Central Mountain Range. This mountain chain forms the backbone of Taiwan, thrusting skyward in folding strata, born of the violent tectonic collision between the Philippine Sea Plate and the Eurasian Plate. Mount Hehuan is positioned near the heart of this geological drama, and though it wears a soft blanket of grass and snow, the bones beneath it are ancient, rough, and filled with tremors. The approach to Hehuanshan itself is part of the dream. Travelers often ascend via the Central Cross Island Highway, a road of dizzying turns and high-altitude passes. As you climb higher, the tropical vegetation of the foothills gives way to moss-draped firs, then wind-sculpted alpine shrubs, and finally, bare grassy ridges topped with patches of frost or snow. In winter, this transition feels like a surreal time slip, from humid jungle to Arctic wind tunnel in a matter of hours. The road crests at Wuling Pass, which, at 3,275 meters, is the highest paved road in Taiwan, and one of the highest in all of East Asia. From Wuling, the view is staggering. On clear days, the sky feels endless, the air thin and sharp. To the west, the sun sets over ocean horizon lines, and to the east, clouds boil and roll across ridges like silver smoke. The most remarkable thing about Hehuanshan, though, is its sky, not just during the day, but especially at night. The absence of light pollution at this elevation means that the Milky Way unfurls in sharp clarity, a spine of starlight arching across the heavens. Meteor showers, lunar halos, and even zodiacal light can be observed from here, drawing amateur astronomers and photographers from across Asia. In fact, Mount Hehuan is considered one of the best stargazing locations in the entire region, and it's not uncommon to see clusters of people huddled in parkas behind tripods on winter nights, waiting for that perfect shot of Saturn rising or Orion wheeling through the cold ether. On certain nights, cloud inversions form below the peaks, turning valleys into vast rolling seas of silver mist, giving the illusion that the mountains are floating islands adrift in a cosmic ocean. During the day, especially in late autumn and early spring, Hehuanshan takes on a more pastoral beauty. Its grassy slopes roll gently under blue skies, broken only by outcroppings of dark rock and low-lying pine. Alpine wildflowers such as gentians, asters, and edelweiss bloom here in quiet defiance of the elevation, dotting the highlands with sudden color. Yushan juniper, a hardy high-altitude tree endemic to Taiwan, clings to ridges and sends its twisted roots deep into stone, anchoring life where it seems impossible. But the real transformation comes with winter. When the temperature dips below freezing, especially from December through February, snow falls gently over the peaks, dusting the mountains with a thin, ethereal white. This draws crowds from lower altitudes, many of whom have never seen snow before. It is one of the only regions in Taiwan where families can build snowmen or watch the land transform into something that feels plucked from the Alps or the Japanese Alps, not from a subtropical island. Under snow, the land becomes hushed and sacred. The crunch of boots on frozen trails. The breath fogging in your scarf. The mountain whispering as wind rushes over ridges. It feels like the earth has paused. Despite its beauty, Heiwanshan is not without danger. Weather here can shift in minutes. The very road that grants access, twisting and narrow, is prone to landslides, heavy fog, and black ice. Snow tires or chains are often required in the colder months, and every year, some underestimate the mountain's mood swings. Visibility can vanish, and wind chill can drop temperatures below -10 degrees Celsius. These risks, however, only reinforce the sensation of being in a truly wild and unreal place, where nature, not convenience, dictates the terms of your experience. Heiwanshan's magic is not merely scenic, it is deeply spiritual. Though not as overtly sacred as Yushan or other Taiwanese holy peaks, it possesses a quiet energy, a sacred neutrality, as if the mountain doesn't demand worship but invites stillness. During the Japanese colonial era, the mountain was seen as a strategic outpost and even a recreational site for officers, who built rough lodges and stations to take in the air. After the retreat of the Republic of China to Taiwan in the mid-20th century, the Heiwanshan military training base was established, and it remains today, largely quiet, its presence giving the mountain a faint undercurrent of history's breath. Surrounding the peak are numerous hiking trails, many of which are short, well-marked, and accessible to casual walkers, a rarity at such elevation. The main peak trail, for example, is a relatively easy hike from the Wuling parking area, leading to a panoramic summit view in under an hour. The East Peak Trail offers even more expansive views of the Chilai mountain range to the north, a jagged row of shark-toothed peaks often shrouded in shifting mist. These trails traverse ridges of crumbling shale, windswept grasslands, and rocky outcrops, always with the sky close above and the island's dense forests laid out far below like a living map. And though Mount Hahuan is often visited in groups, especially during snow season, there are still moments of pure solitude to be found. Moments where the mountain opens up to you and the only sound is your heartbeat, your breath, and the wind slipping through the grass like a spirit. In those moments, Heiwanshan ceases to be a tourist site or even a natural wonder. It becomes something far stranger, a place outside time, where the boundary between earth and sky, between reality and dream, grows thin and shimmers. Here, beneath a vault of unbroken stars or in the hush of fresh snow, one may feel the same sensation that ancient people must have felt on lonely mountaintops. That the world is alive, that there are things we will never understand, and that we stand on the edge of something much greater than ourselves. Mount Hahuan does not thunder or boast. It whispers. It waits. And in doing so, it becomes one of the most unreal and unforgettable places on this planet. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.